Chapter 938. That's not all. Chin Mo walked to the door, turning back to look at Bojo. There aren't any surveillance cameras in the entire corridor, which means even if someone really followed her, there wouldn't be any traces left. Bojo had noticed this as well. That was why it was so difficult to gather evidence. A woman's sixth sense isn't completely baseless. Chin Mo's voice was calm. Compared to what the eyes can see, psychological actions are much faster. As the crime scene, there would definitely be police officers around. Even if the victim was no longer around, there would still be traces left behind. Such a sensational case wouldn't be handled by an ordinary department, hence, it would be handed over to the crime squad. The moment Bojo entered, she saw Director Huang with a solemn expression. "Did you find anything?" Director Huang shook his head, his white-gloved hand moving the mouse. Director Huang shook his head, his white-gloved hand moving the mouse. "I got someone to check, there wasn't anyone else recording her." It was indeed this laptop that recorded her actions, and from the angle of the video, it was the same. "We have completely ruled out the possibility of a homicide. As for the medication she took before her death, we have found the bottle. It was an ordinary sleeping pill, but if taken in large quantities, it could be fatal. She didn't force herself to take the medication, so your judgment was wrong this time." Director Huang sighed. "The possibility of suicide is 99%. Isn't there still 1%? Chin Mo walked over, taking a closer look. He even picked up the teacup. There were traces of coffee in the cup, and beside it was a French pressure pot that was specially used for brewing coffee. The room wasn't particularly clean, but it had a certain ambience. There were 2 words written on the cup, "All the best." "This cup is custom-made." Bojo was familiar with such things, turning her fingers. As expected, there were a few names engraved on the bottom of the cup. They were all single words. "MMH," Director Huang replied. "This cup is a gift from the readers, is there a problem?" "No." Bojo glanced up. "I just don't think someone loved by so many would choose to commit suicide." Director Huang paused. "That's just a guess based on your feelings." He didn't want to believe that a person would leave in such a manner. "I need evidence." Director Huang had met the victim's mother. She had been holding onto his hand, saying, "Believe me, my daughter wouldn't commit suicide, I beg you, believe me." Director Huang was used to such situations. He didn't know how to console the other party. However, he had never seen such a mother who was so sure that her daughter did not commit suicide. Let him look for more clues. Because of this, he had been hesitant, even leaving the scene as it was. But he couldn't find any evidence at all. After the deceased came in that night, no one else came to this floor in the elevator. There were no surveillance cameras in the corridor, and all the clues came from the neighbors. However, the neighbor went to bed early. He was an office worker who worked from 9 to 5. He did not feel that anything was wrong. What about the neighbors? Chin Mo placed the cup down. Director Huang pointed to the room next door. "This is the second time he has to take a statement. He still has to work." That person was indeed very busy. He raised his hand to look at his watch, and his mouth was a little dry. "I've told you everything I need to say. I really don't know anything, and I didn't hear anything. Everything was normal that day, and there were no suspicious people." That was what Chin Mo and Bojo heard when they walked over. Chin Mo sat opposite the neighbor. "Other than that day, what about the rest of the time? Did you see anyone come looking for her?" "Just 3 to 4 times, the neighbor recalled. There was a woman with long curly hair who kept coming over recently. She was the one who opened the door, she should be her friend. But now that you mentioned it, I remember something. About 2 days ago, a tall and skinny man came out from her place. I have a feeling that he was a thief. It has been 5 to 6 days, and she even asked me if there was a burglar in the building. But I don't think it has anything to do with the case. Anyway, everything was normal that day, nothing happened." Chin Mo's hand stilled. "I understand, thank you for your cooperation." You can go to work now. The man heaved a sigh of relief, turning towards Chin Mo. I hope you can solve the case soon. This person isn't bad, he would always greet me in the elevator when I leave. I always forget to bring my keys and would always trouble the neighbor to open the door for me. Now that he has left, honestly, my heart feels empty and afraid. If you have any questions, you can look for me. Just try to ask after work. All right. On the other side, Chin Mo closed his notebook. On the other side, Bojio had already called Sister Turtle. The first question she asked was, does she have a boyfriend? Sister Turtle didn't need to mention who she was. Her voice was still hoarse. No, she rarely writes or goes on blind dates. She doesn't have many male friends and they are all in her hometown. I tried to persuade her to find a boyfriend so she wouldn't feel so bad. All of them are in her hometown. Did anyone come to Jiang City recently? Bojio asked carefully. Sister Turtle wasn't stupid. No, Spade, did you find something? A little. Bojio replied faintly, it's not convenient for me to reveal, but as her friend, I would like to know more about her daily interactions and what kind of person she is. Sister Turtle seemed to relax slightly. Sister Turtle seemed to relax a little. She has a lot of friends, but under normal circumstances, she would not talk about herself. After all, whatever she has encountered is related to her work. Not many people in real life know her pen name. This is probably a characteristic of us writers, where the internet and our lives are separated. It's just that this time's injustice was too much of a blow to her. She has thought about stopping writing like me. To be honest, everyone has a time when they can't hold on anymore, but I don't believe that she would commit suicide. You know, Spade, she said that she always believed that justice may be late, but it will never be absent. Bojio froze. As for what kind of person she is. Sister Turtle's gaze wavered. Take a look at her writings. When Bojio heard this, she glanced over. The Almighty was already seated in front of the computer, his right hand moving the mouse. He was reading a story, a Word document left behind by the computer owner. After Bojio hung up, she walked over. The Word document was automatically saved. Since the laptop hadn't been closed, the cursor hovered at the position. It was the position where she had typed her last words. It feels like I'm living in hell, perhaps a place scarier than hell. I feel like I'm living in hell, or maybe it's a place scarier than hell, but the miracle is that the flowers that bloom in hell are more tenacious. I'm glad that I met you guys, glad that I'm able to write what I want to write under your company. Many people think that this is a war, but it's not. I'm just making the weakest voice I can after encountering injustice. I hope that my voice can influence some people. I hope that they won't become beasts and thieves, so that the original creators will be disappointed. I hope that after they graduate, when they encounter injustice, they will be able to speak out bravely instead of keeping it in their hearts. I hope that they know that no matter how lonely and afraid they are now, there will always be a group of people who will pass through the surging crowd to give them a hug. You're not alone, there's still justice. Human nature can't be understood, but I'll be with you guys, just like you guys used to accompany me. Bojio didn't understand this industry, but she had the basic ability to read and understand. A person who can write these words wouldn't commit suicide. The most important thing is the last sentence. I will be by your side. Bojio turned away from Chin Mo, her fingers tapping the screen. This sentence means to continue. Chin Mo glanced at the youngster's sharp chin, which was very close to him. Smart, but this can't be used as evidence. Director Huang nodded. Bojio clenched her fists tightly. Chin Mo caressed her head. But no one would have the mood to drink coffee before committing suicide. Besides, we can confirm that our previous guess is correct, someone is approaching her. Before Chin Mo could finish his sentence, a round of applause came from the other side. It seems like I came at the wrong time. It was Smith. He was still dressed in a well-ironed suit with a British style, making him look like a famous detective. After hearing young Master Chin's shocking words, I understand why you would think that someone is approaching her. It must be because of the witness's testimony regarding the burglar. The burglar did exist and entered her room, perhaps even stealing her things. But this has nothing to do with her suicide. There weren't any traces at the crime scene, be it fingerprints or other traces. The cause of her death was the sleeping pills she had consumed. If we were to forcefully consider it as a homicide, the person who caused her pain would escape punishment. However, China doesn't seem to have a specific law in this aspect. Now that the culprit has been bailed out and isn't affected, this case should end here. Director Huang was about to say something when Smith spoke again. There was a piece of paper in his hand. The higher-ups have given orders for me to be in charge of this case. Hence, we have to invite the external staff to head out. It's better to end our speculations here. With that, Smith gestured for Qin Mo to leave. With Director Huang's temper, he couldn't take it anymore. Qin Mo's expression was nonchalant. Bo Jiu arched a brow. With the Almighty in this state, the other party would only be in trouble. She hadn't expected to meet the Almighty's gaze. Smith must have treated the Almighty as a formidable opponent, which was why he had gotten so close to him. He was trying to create a tit-for-tat. But he hadn't noticed the Almighty's gaze. To a certain extent, they had a telepathic connection. After sensing the Almighty's gaze, Bo Jiu brushed past him, an item appearing in her left hand. She stuffed her left hand into her pocket as though nothing had happened. Director Huang stilled. He knew what the youngster had taken. It was the medicine box in his palm. But it was obvious who had given the youngster the medicine box. What were they trying to do with the evidence? Director Huang couldn't figure it out, but he didn't say it out loud. One day. Give the two of them another day's time. If the verdict was still a suicide after one day, then the parents of the deceased would be allowed to go home. Director Huang wasn't able to face the mother even though he was an adult. As an experienced detective, he knew there was something wrong with the case. But without evidence, he couldn't speak carelessly. Everything had to be based on evidence. He hoped to be able to provide evidence for the two of them. Smith was still basking in his superiority in front of Qin Mo, oblivious to her actions. He smiled. Young Master Qin, it's best to hand over your temporary identification. Coming to the crime scene without informing me is putting us at a disadvantage. The moment he said that, the rest of the crime squad turned over. What was he trying to do? Was he trying to make young Master Qin a mere figurehead? Director Huang's face darkened, turning ugly. Since I'm in charge, I can't be careless. Young Master Qin, I'm sorry. This time, Qin Mo didn't bother looking at him. Swoosh. Something seemed to have brushed past his face, stabbing into the wooden table behind him. It pierced into the wood. He couldn't help trembling. Qin Mo wasn't affected, bringing the youngster out of the apartment. Director Huang gritted his teeth in anger. Was Smith here to harm him? It hadn't been easy for him to become a member of the crime squad. He had only handed over a temporary identification because he didn't want to. Now that he had thrown the identification back, it would be hard to get it back. Smith, if he wasn't stupid, then there was something wrong with him. Director Huang's eyes dimmed. Could it be him? The spy who had been discovered when Qin Mo had approached the drug dealer? He couldn't be sure, hence, he had to observe. Smith didn't seem to be acting strangely. At this moment, Bo Jiu and Qin Mo got into the car. Bo Jiu opened her palm. It was a bottle of medicine, evidence from the crime scene. You suspect there's something wrong with the medicine? Bo Jiu asked Qin Mo. Qin Mo pressed his fingers on her wound. When she wasn't hurting anymore, he replied, "It's fine, it seems like it's healed." What a shocking recovery speed. Bo Jiu muttered softly, as the overbearing sugar daddy, how can he be defeated by such a small injury? What did you say? Qin Mo arched a brow. Bo Jiu cleared her throat, smiling devilishly. Nothing. The Almighty's ears were really sharp. Is that so? Qin Mo asked slowly. Why did I hear the words sugar daddy? Bojo replied seriously, "You heard wrongly." Chin Mo glanced at her nonchalantly, especially when she looked so serious. He wanted to pinch her. Chin Mo reached out to pinch her face, lowering the bait. "Do you want to hear my analysis?" "Of course." Bojo knew the Almighty must have found something. Chin Mo retracted his hand, his face noble. "Then let's be honest." Bojo asked, "Am I being dishonest?" The Almighty replied, "You haven't taken the bath you promised." Chapter 939. Bojo had always known that the Almighty had a good memory. But it had been almost 2 days since she had helped him bathe. How could he still remember? She remembered the last time she had helped him bathe. She had thought that since he would be the one naked and not her, she would be able to take advantage of him. In the end, she had been flirted with by the Almighty. This time, Bojo glanced at Chin Mo. Bojo glanced at him. She had to find a safe place to wash the Almighty. Madame Zhang was the only one in the Chin family. When she saw Bojo behind Chin Mo, she broke into a smile. This was completely different from Princess's reaction. Princess had been walking in front of Bojo intentionally to provoke her. Thinking about it, a fat cat with a big face moving gracefully, that scene was also very amusing. Madame didn't know that young Master Zhou would be coming. Otherwise, she wouldn't have gone shopping. But she is meeting Madame He. Madame Zhang looked at Bojo with a bright smile. The two of them want to buy some merchandise and dress up as Supreme Alliance fans. They will be watching your competition with young Master. Bojo smiled. Her Madame He and Movie Queenan were developing rapidly. That was good. Movie Queenan could bring Madame He around and make more friends. Even if she wasn't in Jiang City, she wouldn't be lonely. Madame Zhang was still at the side. She hadn't expected her young master to bring them over, so she had made meat dumplings in advance. Bojo smiled. "Madame Zhang, are you planning to make dumplings?" "That's good, I've been craving dumplings." Her words helped Madame Zhang out of her predicament. "As long as you want it, I'll make it now." "All right." Bojo pulled Princess over, intending to sit down and wait for the delicacy. At the same time, she could get some information from the Almighty. Chin Mo had already taken off his trench coat. His white shirt had a different feel to it. His collar was loosened, and his black hair wasn't as neat as when he was outside. It was a little messy, but it made his face look even more distinct. He walked over and held her wrist, his expression elegant. "Aren't you going to make dumplings yourself if you want to eat?" "Make dumplings?" Her. Did the Almighty think she was an all-rounder? Other than instant noodles, she didn't know anything else. She could cook steak, but that was all. "Make dumplings?" "I don't know," Bojo replied seriously. "I'm a terrible cook." Chin Mo gave her a look that seemed to say, "What do you know?" His aloofness made people feel a little unconvinced. She still knew how to play games. Bojo's left cheek puffed up, but she didn't reply. Chin Mo looked at her and smiled. He walked to the table, his voice calm. "I'll wrap one, you wrap the other. Follow my instructions." Bojo arched a brow. The Almighty even knew how to make dumplings? Such complicated cooking skills? Honestly, Bojo was slightly surprised. She knew that the Almighty could cook, but dumplings. In her heart, dumplings were a dish that required a lot of steps. Only an elite chef could make them. He had to admit that the hands of a gamer weren't that bad. Slender, fair, and well-defined. The Almighty's hands were especially good in this aspect. Even though one of his fingers was wrapped in bandages, it didn't affect the delicacy of the dumplings he made. Bojo followed the Almighty's steps. She would take the wrapper and she would take the wrapper. When the Almighty placed the meat in the dough, she would do the same. She kneaded the meat at the right time and was very serious. It could be said that she had never been so focused before. But the dumplings she made didn't look like dumplings. They were flat and the stomach was huge. They were ugly beyond belief. Bojo looked at them for a long time. Chin Mo thought that she would be able to figure something out. It's really ugly. Chin Mo lifted his head, his voice calm. Stupid. Bojo wasn't sure if the Almighty was commenting on her dumplings or her. She saw his expression, it was just like when they were young, extremely cold. Back then, he had the same expression when he taught her how to play the piano and write Chinese characters. But the next second, before she could react, the Almighty had already rolled up his sleeves, allowing her to stand in front of him. Then he emptied his right hand from behind his back and picked up the wrapper. His slightly cold breath landed on the back of her ears. Take the wrapper. Bojo reacted quickly. After taking the wrapper, she realized that their posture wasn't right. Chin Mo maintained his expression. He held onto her hand with one hand, dipping it into the flour at the side. That kind of posture was really very ambiguous. It wasn't just ambiguous. Those who didn't know better would think that they were a newlywed couple. Bojo watched as Madame Zhang kept glancing at them. She wanted to avoid such intimacy. But at this moment, the Almighty spoke. There's nothing wrong with the medicine in your hand, but the medicine in the video isn't this. Bojo immediately grasped the crux of the problem. Did someone change her medication? Smart. Chin Mo seemed to be looking at her hand, his brows slightly furrowed. Raise your hand, the dumplings will be exposed. Bojo regained her original hand speed. There wasn't any change. But at this moment, Bojo's attention wasn't on it. Instead, she was on the case. Which means the medicine in the video was taken by the murderer. But logically speaking, the deceased must have drunk the medicine in the video. That's why she fell into a deep sleep. Besides, the cause of death was found. There was too much sleeping powder in the medicine, but the medicine was changed after her death. There isn't much that doesn't make sense. Chin Mo lowered his body, starting to teach her how to knead. Because the medicine was changed twice. Bojo arched a brow. Chin Mo continued, the deceased has been suffering from a bad cold due to lack of sleep. Coupled with the depression, she hasn't recovered yet. Under normal circumstances, it would be a cough and pharyngitis. She has been taking medicine every day. Actually, it isn't strange that she took the medicine that day, but she didn't know that the medicine she drank wasn't anti-inflammatory and cough medicine, it was sleeping pills. Bojo's thoughts were always clear. You mean an acquaintance committed the crime? Because only acquaintances would know her daily routine so well, right? But she didn't have any acquaintances around her. Initially, I thought it was an acquaintance because only an acquaintance would know when she went out and could create the illusion of stalking her, making her feel uneasy. Chin Mo's gaze deepened. After hearing the neighbor's testimony, I started to have other thoughts. This is a case of magic tricks. Bojo pinched the corner of the dumpling hard. A case of magic tricks? What do you mean? Have you seen magic thieves? Chin Mo furrowed his brows again. His elegant face was filled with a strong sense of abstinence because of this action. Why was the makeup still so ugly? Bojo was rather satisfied since the dumpling could stand up. But when she caught the Almighty's gaze, she took a second look at the dumpling in her hands and the one he had wrapped. Beauty and ugliness were instantly revealed. In order to prevent the Almighty from making her wrap it again, Bojo placed the dumpling down and picked up the second one. Of course I have. She paused. The closer you are, the easier it is to be distracted. Magic tricks rely on distraction to complete the miracle. There's more. The first magic trick these people did wasn't random, it was a chosen one. It was the same for the victim this time. The murderer had chosen her from the start and got to know her bit by bit. After getting to know her habits, he started to make his move. That way, a well-planned murder turned into a suicide that would become a hot topic. Bojo's breath brushed past her ears. That's right. Bojo nodded. Madame Zhang hadn't wanted to disturb her young master and young Master Zhou since they were so close. But when she heard the word suicide, she couldn't take it anymore. "Young master, are you referring to the news on the internet today?" "No, it's a pity for the girl. I heard she was still young and yet, she's gone just like that. Her family must be devastated." The most infuriating thing is the comments from passers-by. They even said she was trying to get famous. "Where did they say that?" Bo Jiu asked. Madame Zhang wiped her hands, pulling out a phone from her apron. "It's all here, I was just looking at it." Bo Jiu took Madame Zhang's phone. It was a forum that had been created by the fans of the deceased. Yet, a bunch of analytical emperors had appeared. "If you want to commit suicide, just commit suicide. Why did you have to let everyone see it? I feel that she just wanted people to notice her, that's why she created such a video. After her death, the topic would naturally become a hot topic. I don't mean to disrespect her, but the truth is that she did it. Her popularity has increased and the statistics are there. Also, her fans are interesting, didn't they just write about her? Didn't they just write similar articles? They just won't let go. Anyway, as a passerby, I just want to give you 2 words, hee hee." After Bojo finished reading the comment, she clicked on the profile picture. When she saw the person she followed, her gaze deepened, turning dark and cold. "Madame Zhang, she isn't a passerby." "She isn't a passerby?" Madame Zhang was confused. Bojo replied faintly, "The person she followed has the profile picture of the violator. It's obvious that the violator knows her. Tell her to be smarter when pretending to be a passerby next time, she shouldn't be so stupid. Besides, not everyone has humanity." Madame Zhang was even more confused by the youngster's words. She was confused because she had never heard the youngster speak so ruthlessly before. However, Madame Zhang didn't know that the hand Bojo placed down was a face that had been squeezed out of shape. This meant that a large portion of the viciousness had been transferred to her palm. Because Bojo knew the source of such comments. Li Shui. At this moment, Li Shui had already returned home from the police station. She wasn't in a good mood since she felt that this was all because of the original author. She opened her WeChat moments. They were all fans she had gained from the original author. She said, "I'm so annoyed. Little fairies, can anyone sing a song for me?" The WeChat moments immediately became lively. Someone else said, "I'm annoyed too, this news is endless. Who can the author blame for her fragile heart? It's good that she's dead. Stop talking, the situation is tense now." Li Shui was smart and quickly stopped those people. Most of them were students. Soon, the topic shifted to homework. In reality, who died and how she died had nothing to do with them. It was understandable. After all, not everyone wanted to distinguish right from wrong and not everyone had a heart of compassion. But it was good that she was dead. How could she turn around and say that she was a true fan who had been wronged by the original author? This was no different from pretending to be a sanctimonious scumbag after raping someone. It was a piece of cake for Bojo to sneak into this circle. The moment she found out about this matter, she had already snuck in. But the more she understood, the more she couldn't control the anger that surged out. She understood how human nature worked. But this time, she had to tolerate it. She was thinking about the consequences. The consequences of the evidence being made public. The deceased would be judged to have committed suicide. The real murderer wouldn't be found. But no one understood. In this case, there were 2 murderers. If the person who took the deceased's life was the first murderer, then the second murderer was Li Shui. The second murderer was Li Shui, the one who violated the copyright. The first murderer was easy to deal with as long as she was caught. The second murderer didn't have to bear any responsibility. Others could just say it and it would be over. Her family was rich. After the robbery, she could still publish books when it was time to publish and be happy when it was time to be happy. The one who couldn't be revived was the original author. Bojo clenched her fists, her lips pursed into a straight line. Her gaze was intense. That kind of gaze should not belong to a high school student. filled with darkness. In that instant, even Auntie Zhang could sense the youth's change. He glanced at Bojio's face and reached out to pull her back. His voice was deep. You can't make dumplings. Why are you venting your anger on yourself? Bojio was pulled back from her thoughts, probably because the aura behind her was too obvious. The person who spoke was clearly not very gentle. But the Almighty seemed to be such an existence. When she was about to become an evil dragon, he would always pull her back. The dumplings were still being made. But this time, the two of them were even closer. One more thing. After I figure it out, the case will be solved. Qin Mo tilted his handsome face. Even his voice was much more magnetic than before. So, you don't have to develop a typical perverted personality. Typical personality? At this moment, Bojio understood the Almighty's train of thought. Had the Almighty already noticed the difference in her? It was just that he understood her existence based on the appearance of the second personality. Bojio would definitely avoid such a topic. More importantly, what didn't the Almighty understand? Chapter 940. Perhaps there isn't anyone here. Bojio's gaze changed. She walked out of his embrace, her face filled with energy. Her expression was completely different. Brother Mo, where is your notebook? Qin Mo watched as the youngster walked up. It was obvious that she would be able to find it even if he didn't ask. Qin Mo's mood lightened up. After all, it meant that she was familiar with his place. According to her habits, she would only be familiar with things that made her feel at ease. Bojio was indeed familiar with it since she had climbed over walls before. Princess kept following behind Bojio. In Princess's heart, this odd-looking youngster liked his master's things a lot. His master was even weirder. After this youngster touched his master's things, he didn't seem angry at all. Instead, he seemed rather happy. Unlike him, every time he stretched out his claws to touch his master's teacup, a cold glare from his master would pierce through him. Was this the difference between being a cat and a human? Princess was indignant. He started to bite the youngster's pants. If you are so capable, turn into a cat too. Let's fight. This time, Bojio ignored him. Usually, she would have used force to suppress him. She dragged the cat into the bedroom and opened the laptop on the study table. She turned it on, entered the password and entered the computer page. At this moment, Qin Mo walked over. He reached out and pinched Princess, throwing him onto the sofa at the side with a cold expression. After a meow, Princess calmed down immediately. Even though his master was usually gentle to him, he would still be anxious when he went missing. But when it came to disciplining him, his master's methods were even more tragic than that youngster's. From now on, he would just be a quiet cat. The crisp sound of the keyboard was like a rhythmic beat. Bojio's fingers were fast. Since she knew the password, it was easier for her to operate. Qin Mo watched as the chat boxes kept popping up on the screen. He arched a brow. There was an image on the screen. It was an image of an internet cafe. He could clearly see someone sitting there eating instant noodles. He didn't forget to use one hand to type. He was a typical internet addict. It could be said that the man's every move was recorded. He didn't even notice that the camera of the computer he was operating had been switched on. He was still shouting at the other person. I'm asking you, are you convinced? If not, let Daddy beat you up again. Did he have the same hobby as a certain someone, asking others to call him Daddy? Or were all high school students like this? However, when a certain someone asked others to call him Daddy, his white canine teeth would be revealed, and he would have an evil smile. It really did feel a little like that. Qin Mo arched a brow. It was rather interesting. Chapter 941. She didn't have to say who she was. Ever since the first case came out, this person had been carrying out a massacre. And using such a method. Luring people to commit suicide. creating a corresponding environment on the internet. Some people saw things from a distorted perspective. But she had never targeted those who were already twisted in the first place. Instead, she chose those who had been treated unfairly. Then, she would lure them to commit suicide, destroying some people's faith. Those who hadn't been destroyed were those who were still mocking and distorting the truth. This kind of person was exactly what she needed. After all, raising a devil that destroyed morals and order, she needed such people to break the bottom line. She destroyed someone's family and even scolded the original wife for taking her position. An infringer who stole someone else's work and then tried to bite back at the original creator. She supported the mistress, supported the theft, supported the passers-by who were outside the moral and legal boundaries and distorted the truth. Without such people, how could fairness be snatched away? It was said that if you wanted to destroy a city, you had to destroy the faith of the people. Good people would be accused of being white lotuses. Evil people would be comforted when they did something wrong. If that was the case, they would really go to hell. Bojo had always known that this world wasn't fair. Hence, she wanted to create fairness. She knew better than anyone else that life came from selfishness and indifference. But today, there was a person who was violated. As a witness, you supported the perpetrator. One day, when you were violated, you would be treated the same way. Bojo narrowed her eyes. The order of the hacker world. It protected the true identity of every hacker, and at the same time, it wouldn't harm anyone's life. This was the principle. It was obvious that the person who impersonated her was just enjoying the massacre. Such a person used her name to do things. Did she ask for her opinion? This is the second person in the maiden's sacrifice, Chin Mo said. Chin Mo's voice rang out. His side profile was still elegant and handsome. But the sacrifice wasn't within her control. She changed the luring from suicide to murder. But in order for the maiden's sacrifice to affect others, the main character of the maiden's sacrifice had to commit suicide. That was why there was that video and the fake suicide scene. Perhaps this isn't the only video. How many people are waiting for the continuation of the maiden's sacrifice is still unknown. Take the student from number 1 middle school for example. All her experiences were recorded by someone. It should be the same this time. Somewhere on the internet, there must be someone doing a live broadcast of this. Bojo couldn't help but be impressed by the Almighty's thinking ability. The other party must have covered up the traces of the network invasion. I will need some time to investigate. If I can't find the medicine, I can only start from this. As long as I can prove that the suicide was intentional, she wouldn't leave with the word suicide. Perhaps, to others, it doesn't matter how she died, but to those who liked her, it was important how she left. Such a strong person, even when she was in extreme pain, she was still fighting against the devil of illness. Even at the end of her life, she was still telling those who loved her to turn their hearts towards the light. Just like that person who liked to lean on her shoulder. Just like that person who smiled brightly at her. Just like that person who kept telling her, don't turn completely black. Such a person shouldn't be able to rest in peace with injustice. In order to let others know that it was an intentional murder, she had to find the place that recorded the actions. It had to be on the internet. Since it was on the internet, there had to be a way. Bojo didn't pause, starting to search the internet again. Because the Almighty was beside her, it wasn't convenient to contact Hoshino. Hence, she didn't enter the hacker's internal forum to obtain information. Instead, she used the huge number of IP addresses to search for all the possible keywords. This time, her attack was different from the previous ones. Ferociously and swiftly, she broke through all the related forums, Tiba, QQ groups, as well as some small-scale websites. It was all for the sake of locating them. It took a long time. Especially when everyone was discussing the writer's suicide due to the pressure, it was even harder to find the location of the maiden's sacrifice. Chin Mo stood beside Bojo, watching as the youngster's fingers moved down, moving the mouse continuously. He knew she was looking for something. But the way she was looking for something was too domineering. If such a person didn't have any principles. Regardless of which country it was, it would be unimaginable. But Chin Mo knew very well that this person, whom he loved more and more, was domineering but never took the initiative to hurt others. Time passed quickly. Princess couldn't understand how his master could stand by the side and look at that youngster for more than an hour. Was that youngster as domineering and handsome as him? If he wanted to look, he should be looking at him. Chin Mo took the time to glance at Princess. Because of the naughtiness of cats, they would always bite on anything that looked like a thread. Princess was no exception. Chin Mo stood up, carried Princess and placed him outside the door. His actions were gentle, but the princess finally figured out something. Her master must have wanted to marry that boy with a strange aura to be her second master. Otherwise, why would she be chased out? Those two people must have wanted to do something bad that they didn't want her to see. Meow, meow. Just as Princess lowered his big cat head and paced around with a solemn expression, Madame Zhang came up. Auntie Zhang came up and said, "Why did the princess come out?" Meow. Someone is up to no good with his master, hurry and save him. Madame Zhang walked past him and knocked on the door. To her surprise, it was her young master who opened the door. Usually, whenever young Master Jiu was around, young Master Jiu would be the one opening the door. "Young master, the dumplings are ready, let's go down and eat." Chin Mo replied calmly, "It's fine, I'll go down." Eat in the bedroom? Madame Zhang was shocked, this wasn't her young master's style. Chin Mo replied, heading downstairs. There were many dumplings. Someone's dumplings were especially obvious after they came out of the pot. Chin Mo glanced at the exquisite round plate at the side, all of the dumplings that looked slightly ugly. Madame Zhang couldn't help but laugh when she saw this. Who would have thought that young master would one day choose such dumplings? It seemed like it didn't matter if the dumplings were exquisite or not, the important thing was who made them. When Chin Mo entered the room with 2 plates of dumplings, the silver-haired youngster's hands were still moving, faster than before. Many internet cafes were affected on the same day. They said that there was a problem with the operating system, which kept jumping randomly. Since there wasn't anything serious, no one paid attention to it. They just thought that there was something wrong with the computer. In reality, all of this happened because the youngster was searching for something. Yin Guiyao was sitting in the internet cafes collecting money when he frowned. When he saw the abnormality in his internet cafes, he instinctively looked towards the silver-haired youngster's usual seat. He wasn't here. Why was this happening? Yin Guiyao had a cigarette in his mouth, kicking the chair and asking the person on duty, "Spade didn't come today, right?" "No." The young man who looked like a university student widened his eyes. "Does Peking University mean that Big Spade is coming today?" "My idol is coming." Yin Guiyao was getting old, he couldn't take the shaking. "No, I was just asking." Then he found an excuse, left the internet cafes, and lit another cigarette. The internet was still unstable? Did something happen? Yin Guiyao wasn't stupid, but he was getting old. Some things were better left to him. Every time the little captain came to his internet cafes, there would be some abnormalities. Unless it was a hacker who could do this. Yin Guiyao took a puff of his cigarette, watching the smoke ring disappear. Then he saw the huge screen hanging in the shopping mall in the distance. The content of the report made his eyes darken. Was it because of this case? Uncle, what are you looking at?" Feng Shang, who had been reporting on time the next day, followed Yin Guiyao's gaze. Shui Yaoyao was standing behind him, her gaze landing on the screen as well. "It's her." "Her? You know her?" Yin Guiyao arched a brow. "She also graduated from number 1 middle school, she wasn't that old. I remember when she returned to school, when no one spoke up for His Highness Zhou, she even spoke up for him. She said that one's sexual orientation was free, and they should give some space as long as His Highness Zhou didn't hurt anyone. I was only in year 1 then, and I wasn't familiar with His Highness Zhou." In fact, no one was familiar with His Highness Geo. Many people were surprised that she would speak up for His Highness Geo. After all, she was quite successful, a senior who was invited back by the school director to give a speech. Yin Weiyao seemed to be deep in thought. He put out the cigarette and threw it into the bin. Little Captain, do you remember this person helping him? That's hard to say. Shui Yao Yao recalled. At that time, His Highness Geo had already run away. He wouldn't have thought that someone would speak up for him. I remember because it was on the stage. Feng Shang's reaction was always a beat slower. Now that he understood what they were talking about, he didn't have the chance to interrupt. At this moment, in the bedroom on the second floor of the Qin family's house. After the youngster finished watching a video from that year, she paused for 10 seconds. Bo Jiao hadn't expected to find a video of a speech from a year ago. In the video, she clearly saw how a stranger had managed to preserve a trace of her dignity in the past. And that stranger wasn't anyone else, it was the deceased. Bo Jiao's throat moved. She knew the situation the original owner of her body had been in back then. Not many people had been willing to help her. Stepping forward in such a situation would undoubtedly put some people in a difficult position. But that person had still stepped forward. Bo Jiao's fingers paused. She saved the video. The next moment, her fingers moved even faster. This time, she moved her fingers, taking out the golden electronic cigarette lighter. She pushed it upwards, turning it into a USB drive. She plugged it into her laptop and used the password Z, activating her privileges as the young lord of the hacker world. Chapter 942. Hence, on this day. The Almighty, who had been playing LOL with a cigarette in his mouth, suddenly raised his eyebrows and threw a message to his fans. Something came up and I have to go offline. Let's meet another day. It wasn't just the Almighty, there were also bespectacled programmers with a dull face and the sloppy noodle shop uncle. Their positions were different, even their age, appearance and social status were different. The only similarity was that they all had the same logo on their computers. Z, the black words were written in huge letters in the middle of the screen. The black feather fell with the special effect, as though it was reborn from a raging fire. Many years ago, when they had become hackers, they had already promised to follow the hacker's creed. There was a special one on it. When the Z logo appeared on the computer, they had to obey. Very few people saw the logo appear on the computer. No one knew what form it would take. However, every hacker knew that when it appeared, it would be the time for them to abandon their hidden identities and return to their old profession. Because that was their young lord. The number one and only young lord in the hacker world. According to those who had been through it, there was no need to describe the logo because when it appeared in the past, you would definitely recognize it at first glance. Because it could awaken the deepest part of your heart. Hence, the dull programmer took off her spectacles, revealing her beautiful face. She raised her left hand and removed the black headband. When she looked up again, she was seductive and charming. What made it even harder for people to look away was her fingers on the keyboard, typing at lightning speed. It wasn't just her, the Almighty and the noodle shop uncle were doing the same thing. Especially when the noodle shop uncle was typing, the high school student with a school bag was still ordering. Uncle, a bowl of Chongqing noodles with extra chili. Coming. The noodle shop uncle replied as he typed quickly. More than 10 IP addresses were like glowing wires, all of them gathered at Bo Jiao's location. After the most rigorous information processing, Bo Jiao's fingers moved slightly, tapping on the keyboard, analyzing the information and integrating it. Then, she used the code to expand the scope of the search by another dimension. This meant that this time, the virtual main program would also be within her detection range, including those hidden in the network that didn't dare to show their faces. Bo Jiao was the one leading the hackers. Therefore, when the host god saw that he had broken through the special firewall that could not be broken, he could not help but whistle, cool. That was not all. Perhaps no one knew how fast the young master's hand speed was. After successfully escaping from the dense network, he went straight into the hinterland. It was so cool that it made every hacker's scalp go numb. This was their carnival. No one could understand it, but it was enough to make people's blood boil. The high school student who asked for noodles couldn't help but get up and knock on the cashier counter. "Uncle, where's the noodles?" The uncle didn't say anything, but the corners of his mouth seemed to curl into a smile. The high school student had never seen the uncle like this before. He wanted to ask again. He heard the noodle shop uncle spit out 2 words softly, K-O, K-O. The high school student frowned. He thought to himself, "I asked you to cook noodles, but you're still playing games. That's not right, uncle." Just as the high school student was about to look at the computer page, the noodle shop uncle tapped his index finger lightly and pressed the spacebar. The noodle shop uncle tapped his index finger lightly and pressed the spacebar. When he raised his head again, he had already returned to his usual sloppy appearance. "You want some Chongqing noodles with extra chili, right? Coming. You." The high school student swallowed the words he wanted to say. Forget it, he could still wait for a bowl of Chongqing noodles. The high school student was none other than the thorn-head youngster, the eldest brother of number 2 middle school. This was originally a noodle shop that was opened between number 1 middle school and number 2 middle school. He usually hung out with his father and really didn't pay attention to the specific news on the internet. When he sat down again, he raised his head and looked towards the small screen in the shop. He was completely stunned, his head was buzzing. It also said that the person suspected of having a dispute with the deceased had been eliminated as the deceased had committed suicide. What did it mean by someone suspected of having a dispute with the deceased? F***ck, he knew what kind of person that woman was. She stole something and was preparing to buy the hot search to bite back. Fortunately, the report also said that the fan support group of the deceased was looking for an insider. If there's such a person around you, she snatches the glory that others deserve, enjoys the attention that others' talents bring her, and maliciously slanders the original author. If you're in the know, we hope that you can provide us with the corresponding evidence. Although the adult has passed away, we'll help her defend her rights and fight a copyright infringement lawsuit. The thorn-head youngster rushed out of the noodle shop and snatched the phone from his lackey. "Boss, what are you doing?" "My phone is out of battery, I'm using yours to get something." The thorn-head youngster wanted to prove that he was too stupid and slow to use these things. He opened WeChat, intending to tell everything he knew to his nemesis, the boss of number 1 middle school, Spade Z. In the Qin family's house, Bojio had already found the provocative webpage. It was indeed well hidden, even the registered address of the website was overseas. But those things didn't stop her invasion. Just as Qin Mo had expected, everyone here witnessed a silent massacre. From the moment the deceased had been infringed, the moment she appeared to be in pain, it had all been recorded in video form. Video after video, it was as if one could see that the man was utterly defeated by reality. It seemed as though such a person would attract the attention of the crowd. They waited for the deceased to commit suicide every day, but she was stubborn. After the last video of the deceased was uploaded, someone suggested committing suicide together. Because it was meaningless to live like this. Because it was meaningless to live like this. Bojio narrowed her eyes. This is her motive, she wants to cause a mass destruction, that's why the maiden's sacrifice came about. She had assumed that the Almighty would say something. Unexpectedly, the moment she opened her mouth, the Almighty fed her a dumpling that wasn't as hot anymore. The dumpling was delicious, the skin thin and the filling big. When she bit down, Bojio wanted to swallow her tongue along with it. Qin Mo had always liked to do things himself when it came to feeding someone. He picked up another dumpling, moved his thin lips over, and blew on it. Bojio's fingers paused. She watched his handsome and aloof side profile, his eyelashes fluttering when he lowered his lids to cool the dumplings. Her entire body felt warm and fuzzy. She still remembered when the Almighty and the others had first arrived. Grandpa had made dumplings and she had been called over. She hadn't known how to use chopsticks. She hadn't spent much time in China since she was born, so she had used a spoon to scoop. She loved dumplings, but no matter how she ate, she couldn't seem to do it properly. Unlike the doll beside her, who was well-mannered even when eating dumplings. In the end, he couldn't stand her stupidity. When she couldn't scoop up the dumpling, he used his chopsticks to pick one up, blew on it, and stuffed it into her mouth. He said coldly, "You're so stupid, it's a waste of your intelligent face." Sometimes, Bojio found it strange. These memories started to surface when she had confirmed that the Almighty was her childhood pet. It was something she couldn't forget. In reality, Bojio hadn't forgotten. But after she became Z, many things were destined to be treasured, hidden in the deepest part of her heart. Besides, he was Chin Mo, a criminal profiler. He caught people like her. The second dumpling was brought to her lips. Bojio opened her mouth instinctively. It looked very obedient. Chin Mo's lips lifted into a smile. The princess watched this scene from the side. She was extremely jealous. Although her master was very patient when he was feeding her, she was still very angry. But he had never been so gentle. Indeed. When he saw the youngster's mouth stain, he leaned over, his fingers brushing past. His deep gaze was hard to look away. They were sitting shoulder to shoulder. Because of Chin Mo's actions, they were very close. Even when she was eating the dumplings, Bojio could smell the Almighty's scent. The sun shone down. Just like that, Chin Mo fed the typing youngster a dumpling and ate another one himself. Both of them were good-looking and the scene was very pleasing to the eye. Madame Zhang, who was standing outside, didn't send anything else in. Bojio noticed the dumplings on the plate. Half of them were exquisitely wrapped and the other half were in different shapes. But the ones the Almighty fed her were all beautiful ones. The rest were all crooked and ended up in the Almighty's mouth. As for the dumplings that were out of place, it was obvious that she was the one who made them. Bojio's expression changed immediately. She watched as Chin Mo ate the fourth dumpling. "Is it delicious?" Usually, at this moment, her close friend would say it was delicious to coax her overbearing CEO. But the Almighty never followed the script. "Are you asking for a lie?" Chin Mo's tone was calm as he picked another dumpling for her. Bojio. She understood. The dumplings probably didn't taste good. In the future, if she really couldn't resist kidnapping the Almighty, she would cook instant noodles for him. This was the only culinary skill she had. While Bojio was deep in her thoughts, she didn't know that it wasn't because of the variety of dumplings on the plate. Instead, Chin Mo had placed all the dumplings she had made on his plate. It had nothing to do with the taste, it was because she was the one who had made the dumplings. After Chin Mo fed her the last dumpling, she stopped what she was doing and transferred all the evidence to her USB drive. "Wait a minute." Chin Mo's long and slender fingers tapped the screen. "There's something wrong with this post." Bojio glanced over. Indeed, there was a problem. From the contents, it seemed to be a new memorial. "This is," Chin Mo's gaze deepened. "The next victim." With that, he whipped out his phone and called Director Huang. "I need you to look for someone." "No, it isn't the witness this time, it is the next victim." "What did you say?" "The next victim?" Director Huang bolted upright from his seat. Chin Mo's tone was calm. He didn't explain much, just 5 words. "The maiden's sacrifice." These 5 words were enough for Director Huang to understand. But he never expected a case that had already passed to continue. A chill ran down Director Huang's spine. "What did you find?" "A lot." Director Huang frowned. "It's not easy." "Why not?" Chin Mo arched a brow. Director Huang tugged at his hair, his anger still raging. "Smith has already informed the media that the victim has committed suicide. If it's a serial killer case, the higher-ups wouldn't be able to publish such information." Chin Mo glanced at the youngster, his expression unchanging. "There's a website that recorded the victim's actions for the past month, all the way until her death. That was the last video, and it can be confirmed that she didn't commit suicide, it was a premeditated murder. You can take a look at the video online. Even though it's a white medicine bottle, the one in the police's hands isn't the same as the one in the video because the size isn't the same. This proves that someone had swapped out the evidence before the police arrived. If it wasn't a murder, what evidence would they have swapped out? Or is it because you want to continue climbing up the ladder, so even if you know about it, you're just pretending to be oblivious? F***ck, don't try to goad me. Director Huang slammed the table. I'm thinking about what to do. Qin Mo's voice reverted to its usual nonchalance. Hold a press conference and announce how she died. I don't need you to tell me, I know. A second ago, Director Huang was still cursing the rascal in his heart, but the next second, he broke into a smile. That way, the mother wouldn't have to suffer so much. Director Huang had seen some comments online. Li Shue's statement had been taken by the crime squad. When he heard Li Shue say, "This has nothing to do with her, she committed suicide because she couldn't take it," Director Huang finally understood why the mother had cried. The scary thing wasn't the internet, it was the humanity that had been destroyed in real life. Even when she saw the victim's mother, Li Shue still had a look on her face. Isn't it just an apology? I'll apologize. Your daughter is dead, go cry for your daughter. What's the point of crying here? He couldn't forget the mother's gaze, the way she had looked at Li Shue, her eyes filled with hatred and despair. But there was nothing he could do. He looked at the mother, his fingers trembling as he asked, "Is there no other way? My daughter really wouldn't commit suicide, is that how everyone thinks of her? What about the person just now? He didn't receive any punishment? Why did my daughter persevere for so long?" At that moment, he couldn't answer, it was as though his throat was being strangled. He didn't know how to tell a mother that her daughter had already committed suicide. Chapter 943. He watched the mother, his fingers trembling as he asked, "Is there no other way? My daughter wouldn't commit suicide. Is that what everyone thinks of her? What about the person just now? Didn't she receive any punishment? Why did my daughter persevere for so long?" He couldn't answer, it was as though he was being strangled. He didn't know how to tell a mother that her daughter had been confirmed to be a suicide. But now, he could speak. He could live up to his clothes and tell the mother, "There's another way. We won't allow a murderer to get away scot-free." At the Qin family's house, Bo Jiao had already stood up from her computer. She had enough evidence to clear the name of the victim. She knew that once the system confirmed it as a suicide, it would be difficult to overturn it. She was considering if she should use her identity to do something. However, when she stood up, the person next to her had already grabbed her wrist and stepped forward before she did. Bo Jiao thought that this was the difference between this person and everyone else. For a moment, she felt that even people from different camps had the same bottom line. The heat of the matter didn't decrease. This was what the girl living in the apartment was happy to see. But it was more troublesome to deal with other matters. As the murderer, she had noticed the problem with the medicine bottle earlier than Qin Mo. She glanced up at the tall and slender man who hadn't left the apartment the entire day. She pulled open the drawer and took out a bank card. "Hide abroad for a few days. I'll inform you once things have settled down." The tall and slender man was confused. "Why are you asking me to leave so suddenly? Isn't everything going according to our plan?" "Don't worry, those people wouldn't have expected her to be murdered. It's safer to leave." The girl narrowed her eyes. "We were too late, this person is too difficult to deal with. We have been waiting for news from the court, believing that she would be able to seek redress. Our beliefs weren't affected at all. It was my miscalculation, I assumed that she would be led by me soon. Even though the outcome isn't bad, it brought us huge trouble." "What trouble could there be?" The tall and slender man wasn't bothered. "There aren't any surveillance cameras in the building. Even if there were, they wouldn't suspect me. All right, let's end this discussion here." The girl tapped her fingers on the keyboard. I've already bought a plane ticket for you tomorrow. You don't have to worry about the trouble since the only evidence is in our hands. Even if someone suspects you, they don't have any evidence. There are some mistakes in the video itself. What I'm worried about is Chin Mo seeing something from it. Didn't the higher-ups already inform us that Chin Mo wasn't involved in the entire case? The tall and slender man's eyebrows twitched. If he doesn't come into contact with the case, there won't be any clues. By the time he comes into contact with the case, our goal will have already been accomplished. What is there to worry about? The tall and slender man hadn't expected Chin Mo to take action when he said that. Not only that, they didn't know that the real Z was with Chin Mo. In front of the police station. On this day, there were too many people coming and going. There was a group of about 7 or 8 people who were dressed the same. From Bojio's angle, she couldn't see their faces clearly. However, he could understand what they were doing at the police station. Because one of them was holding a very simple sign. There were only 2 words on the sign. It was the pseudonym of the victim. They had come to the police station to find more people who knew the truth and were willing to speak up. The passers-by didn't understand why they were doing this. In fact, no one could understand why a thorny youngster who didn't have good grades and only cared about whose fist was stronger would come here to help. They didn't understand why Shui Yaoyao and Feng Shang, who had received the flyers and helped them distribute them, were here. No one would understand. Uncle Ian was sitting in his cotton car. He had been smoking when he saw the selling spot nearby. He pushed open the car door and got a bottle of mineral water. He carried it over his shoulder and distributed it to the people who had never given up on seeking justice for the victim. Those people weren't just anyone. They were the readers of the victim. There weren't many people here. But everyone's eyes were bright and resolute. If one were to ask why these people would stand here of their own accord, it was because they wanted to help the person who couldn't speak anymore. They wanted to clench their teeth and fight for the dream that had been stolen from them. This wasn't a world that should be like this. Those who were truly hurt were suppressed in the dust. Those who had infringed, slandered, and stolen their dreams couldn't even be bothered to apologize. There had to be justice in this world. If there wasn't, they would fight for it. All of them were girls. They were saving money when drinking water because they knew that this was just the beginning. They still had to save money to fight the infringers. Bojio watched the scene, too many emotions surging in her chest. She suppressed them silently. She had a battle to fight with the Almighty. The name of the battle would be Karma Will Prevail. If you don't believe me, look up and see who will be spared by the heavens. The black Hummer didn't stop. When Chin Mo and Bojio appeared at the police station, it was when Director Huang was facing a crisis. After Smith had analyzed the entire case, he had stood out to refute his deductions. When he looked at the camera, he said something that almost made Smith jump up. The victim didn't commit suicide. It was a homicide. In that instant, the crowd was in an uproar. Smith's expression changed. What nonsense are you spouting? He hadn't expected someone to refute his theory. Furthermore, it was during the press conference. Now that the case had attracted so much attention, hadn't he considered the impact of his statement? The media were not jealous. They immediately caught the main point and asked, could it be that the police have found some evidence? Evidence. Director Huang started to break out in cold sweat. He really didn't have any evidence, but this was the last chance to redress the victim's name. He had to grab hold of it. But evidence, just as Director Huang was about to collapse, a figure appeared beside the stage. Suddenly, a silhouette appeared beside the platform. Using one hand as support, he jumped up. Almost everyone that could think of handsome words were imprinted on the youngster's body. His silver hair seemed to reflect light as he met the reporter's gaze. Of course I have evidence. With that, the youngster turned. Director Huang, can you tell everyone about the evidence you just gave me? Director Huang hadn't given her any evidence. But he wasn't stupid, he understood the youngster's intentions the moment he heard her words. His heart calmed down, he glanced up at the people below. Sure. He hadn't expected that he would be able to say 2 words. The youngster walked over to the person in charge of the projector, inserting the USB into the laptop. His slender fingers were typing rapidly on the keyboard. Very quickly, a photo appeared on the screen. And then, the reporters tilted their heads, waiting for Director Huang to continue. The youngster paused, seemingly waiting as well. Director Huang's heart was boiling. What exactly was the meaning of this? He had started with a photo. What kind of logic was this? Seconds trickled by. Just as the reporters were frowning and Smith was about to explode, a voice came from the side. A voice came from the side of the crowd. If Director Huang allows it, I can explain on behalf of Director Huang why this is considered evidence. It was Qin Mo. Who knew where he had gotten the police uniform from? Now, he was wearing it and even had a police cap. He seemed to be upright and noble. With this uniform, he had the right to explain the evidence. Besides, it wouldn't be as eye-catching as a private uniform. This was because when the brim of the hat was lowered, the people below could only see the beautiful thin lips of the person. This was within Bojiu and Qin Mo's consideration. Director Huang felt that he was finally free, but he understood their intentions. They were professionally sports players, and if their identities were to be exposed, there would be a huge uproar. Qin Mo's uniform had indeed been borrowed. He had just buttoned the last button when he had gone up the stage. But even then, Qin Mo's aura hadn't changed. Instead, it was because he was wearing a police uniform that he seemed even more dignified and handsome. Qin Mo didn't waste any time, glancing over at Bojiu. Their gazes met in midair. Qin Mo opened his mouth. This photo was taken when the police were collecting evidence at the crime scene. We found a medicine bottle on the ground. According to the forensic analysis, the victim had overdosed on the sleeping pills inside, which was why she couldn't wake up. Therefore, the medicine in the bottle must be the main cause of the victim's death, but... At this point, he paused. Qin Mo didn't even need to turn to look. The youngster had already switched the image. A video appeared, pausing on the scene of the victim drinking the medicine and zooming in. I believe everyone here has seen this video. The victim lowered her head to take the medication. It seemed like she couldn't take the pain anymore, which was why she chose to commit suicide. Comparing the 2 bottles of medicine, even though they were both white in color and looked similar, one was bigger than the other. In other words, the bottle that the victim was holding in the video wasn't a bottle of sleeping pills. According to the medical staff's appraisal, the bottle in the victim's hand was anti-inflammatory and cough medicine. The victim had been sick all this time, so the doctor prescribed her this kind of medicine. In other words, the victim was only drinking medicine that could alleviate her condition. The strange thing was that the bottle of sleeping pills that shouldn't have been in the victim's room had disappeared. We deduced that the victim's medicine had been swapped, which means that she didn't know that the medicine she had been drinking had been swapped with sleeping pills. Qin Mo's last sentence left his mouth. Everyone sucked in a sharp breath. Some of them couldn't help but cover their mouths in shock. Smith stood up. At the end of the day, this is just your reasoning. Without concrete evidence, this kind of subjective reasoning is even more lacking. Who said I don't have evidence? Qin Mo's voice had always been calm, but his aura was still intimidating. Smith was from overseas and was about the same size as Qin Mo. In his mind, Smith was just a second-rate profiler and he didn't have to be afraid of him. But when the 2 of them stood together, Smith even had the urge to break into a run. Wasn't Qin Mo's presence a little too strong? Bojiu took a moment to glance at Smith. She guessed that the expert who claimed to know a lot about criminology and other criminologists were just second-rate profilers in his eyes was going to be slapped in the face by the Almighty. Qin Mo glanced at Bojiu. Bojiu immediately moved her fingers, pulling out all the information they had gathered. The cameraman had already noticed the youngster's typing speed. The moment he saw it, he jumped in fright. He opened multiple video windows at the same time, typing extremely fast. It was so fast that it was dazzling. almost in a second, one short video after another appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Then came the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, the eighth, and the ninth. The same man appeared in every video. He was tall and skinny, with a sharp mouth and cheeks like a monkey. He didn't look like a local and his movements were very deliberate. The youngster played the short video and adjusted it to a certain frequency so that Chin Mo could explain better. It had to be said that the cooperation between the two of them was really clean and efficient. Chin Mo continued. There weren't any surveillance cameras in the corridor of the building that the victim lived in. Hence, we expanded the range and collected all the videos of the places that the victim had been to. That's when we discovered this. This is the person that the victim had been facing these days. Someone had been following her. She had probably noticed it, but every time she turned around, she couldn't find the person. Hence, she would express a certain degree of uneasiness in the video. A woman's sixth sense told her that something was wrong, but at that time, the victim thought it was a thief and even reported the case with her neighbor. The neighbor confirmed that the victim didn't have any mental problems and the stalker did exist. The victim didn't have many members of the opposite sex, but on the day of her death, the same man had entered her house twice. One of the times was when she wasn't home and the neighbor found it strange that the man had walked out of her house without greeting her. Based on the time, he had entered the house twice. The first time was when the victim wasn't home and the second time was after her death. Hence, we deduced that he was the one who changed the victim's dressing. Chapter 944. Smith was the first to shake his head. No, it still doesn't make sense. I admit what you said, there is a thief, but the victim's mental disorder might have something to do with the thief who was stalking her. But you can't say that a thief is a murderer. We need evidence. Everyone has seen the video. At the time, the victim was the only one in the room, and the video was taken by the laptop in the victim's room. The reason the video was uploaded was because the murderer set the recording time so that the video would appear on the internet after her death. She wanted people to remember her. If she didn't commit suicide, why would she take such a video? From a psychological point of view, this is a suicide with a purpose. She wanted attention since she had been wronged. That was the only logical thing to do. If it was really a murder, the video wouldn't have appeared. Even if it did, the murderer would have set up a hidden camera in the room. But it was the opposite, the victim was the one who took the video. She was the one who opened the laptop. Other than her, no one else was at the scene. Chin Mo tapped the side of his leg. When he did that, he reminded people of the Star Trek commander, cold, handsome, and full of abstinence. He looked at Smith and seemed to smile. His eyes were cold as he said slowly, "Who said that a laptop can only be used on the spot?" Smith wasn't an ordinary person, he had handled many cases. Even though he hadn't caught Z, he had some knowledge in this area. Hence, when Chin Mo asked this question, his expression changed. "You mean, remote control?" Chin Mo's voice didn't change much. When he said this, the youngster had already changed the page. This way, everyone present could see the changes on the screen. The victim's laptop was attacked and there were traces of damage to the firewall. The special department would be able to detect the changes in the data. That night, someone hacked into the victim's network and used remote control to secretly turn on the laptop's camera. That wasn't all, the person who set the recording time was the same person. All of a sudden, Smith's mouth seemed to have been gagged. The crowd was in an uproar. A suicide case had turned into a murder case, and in such a manner. Of course, the reporters were uneasy. After all, such a method was unheard of. Stalking, changing medicine, and filming like this. No wonder the victim acted like she was insane. She must have sensed something at the time, but she couldn't be sure. Smith saw that the rhythm had been taken away, but he still felt that it didn't make sense. What about the murderer's motive? According to what you said, an ordinary person wouldn't be able to do such a complicated technique. I can't understand why an organization would spend so much effort on an ordinary person. It's illogical. Mr. Smith seems to have forgotten. Chin Mo spoke slowly, you have a case on your hands. The culprit doesn't care about the status of the other party. Moreover, the similarities between the cases are all carried out online. You should be familiar with the name of the case, the Maiden's Sacrifice. It was a premeditated serial case that had been planned for a long time. When the words, Maiden's Sacrifice, came out, Kieran was stunned. Smith immediately jumped up. This is impossible. Show him the evidence. Chin Mo lifted his lids. In his police uniform, he was a gentleman with both internal and external skills. The reporters finally recognized Chin Mo's face. Under the police cap was a perfectly curved chin. It wasn't anyone else but the young master of the Chin family. Another wave of commotion broke out. While the Almighty was distracted, Bojio's fingers flew across the keyboard, completely conquering the website that she had found previously. This time, her method was the real young lord of the hacker world. It was different from other hackers' attacks. In reality, when it came from Z, the other party's computer wouldn't have any alarm system. There weren't many hackers in the world who could infiltrate and retreat without leaving a trace. Usually, by the time someone reacted, Bojio had already grasped the entire website's operations. The most obvious target was the stalking post regarding the victim. There were some video recordings and comments below, sending chills down everyone's spine. What kind of organization was this? What were the people involved in this game thinking? Using their own lives as an example and taking pleasure in it? Didn't these people think about how sad their parents would be when they saw them in this state? Some of them had simply met with a setback at work. Some of them simply felt that there was no meaning in living. The last few were completely dark. After hurting others, they tried to bite back. Those who didn't succeed came here to express their thoughts. Of course, there were also those who couldn't get justice. No matter which one it was, they were gradually led to the current state by others step by step. That way, they wouldn't feel anything. Unbeknownst to them, that kind of existence was scarier than ghosts. Bojio's face was blocked by the laptop, her voice coming out slowly. Her voice had a natural sense of narration. The people who often speak here are all extremely dangerous. It's not because they would really commit suicide. If they really couldn't handle the pressure and committed suicide, they would be the kind of people who couldn't get justice. As for the others, they would become more and more violent. They originally didn't have a bottom line. After such a long period of influence, they became even more aggressive. Aggressive means that when they harmed others, they would still feel that it was the other party's fault. They would feel that it was natural to steal someone's things and receive attention. The influence of such values was terrifying. It was like a virus, slowly invading their hearts. Those who didn't know right from wrong would soon join them. This is the Maiden's Sacrifice. Yes. The other party's motive wasn't a large-scale suicide. That was just foreplay. There were people who wanted to use this method. They wanted to nurture people who didn't have a bottom line. When the time came, these people would help them to complete the massacre. When Smith saw the content on the website, his expression changed. It was indeed the Maiden's Sacrifice, the case he had been working on. The Maiden's Sacrifice was terrifying because it was ethereal. It was like a seed buried in the bottom of one's heart. No one knew when it would be triggered. Because it was an online case, it was extremely difficult to investigate. Moreover, Smith suspected that the other party had used an overseas ID because that was the only way they could avoid being tracked by many departments. In his heart, he was the only one who could expose the other party. He hadn't expected that the Maiden's Sacrifice would happen right in front of him, but he hadn't noticed it. Instead, Chin Mo had found out. This was undoubtedly a public slap to his face. How was he going to face the title of a specially hired criminal psychologist in the future? When the camera turned, Smith's face turned green. Some reporters stood up and said, if such a case is exposed to the public without any embellishment, what if it causes a negative impact? After all, there is too much negative news about this case. Negative news? Qin Mo's voice was calm. Perhaps, but if we can only redress the grievances by letting the public know without embellishment, why don't we do it? In China, there are too many things that people don't talk about. It isn't because it doesn't exist, but after we talk about it, some people will always come looking for trouble. But what does that matter? We say that humans are different from other animals because they are not animals. That's because humans aren't beasts. There's always something in the depths of our hearts that insists. We want to become more outstanding people, even if we might not be able to overcome the hurdle we met today. We need to learn to face some stains because justice is still waiting for us somewhere. We need to understand that in this world, there are good people and bad people. There are also people who live in the gray area. We might not be able to become righteous people, but we will never hurt others. We learn to respect ourselves, and at the same time, we will learn to respect others. The process of waiting for justice has always been difficult. We knew there would be darkness, but we never gave up. Even now, outside the police station, there is still a group of people standing up for the victim. I thought this was the message we wanted to pass on. With that, Qin Mo arched a brow and looked towards the reporter. If people think that redressing someone's grievances is a negative impact, I suspect we don't have the same worldview. This sentence blocked the reporter's words perfectly. In that moment, Bojio paused and looked towards the tall and slender figure in the middle. This was probably the difference between the Chinese soldiers. Regardless of the time, they could stand tall and straight like a white poplar tree that couldn't be touched by the wind and rain. Whatever she saw, the Almighty would see too. There was probably nothing more heartwarming than this kind of tacit understanding. Qin Mo wore a police cap and looked straight into the camera. It's time to give the victim justice. Regardless of whether it is the murderer or the person who took away her dreams, they should be punished by the law. When the scene appeared on the television, a middle-aged woman in her 50s looked at the screen through the glass window of the convenience store. Tears streamed down her face. A few girls beside her rushed over to help her up. They were still saying, "Auntie, don't be like this. There will be a way, we will definitely find a way." The middle-aged woman shook her head and gestured for them to look at the screen. It was a police officer with a perfect silhouette. He wore a police cap and the badge glowed brightly. However, it couldn't hide the depth in his eyes. He said, "It's time to give the victim justice. Regardless of whether it is the murderer or the person who took away her dreams, they should be punished by the law." The moment they heard his words, the girls' first reaction wasn't to cry tears of joy. Instead, they asked the person beside them, "Is this news real?" Until the shop owner nodded. Only then did the girls react. They hugged each other happily. Then, wave after wave of cries rang out. It was a soft, low cry that seemed to have been suppressed for a long time and was finally released. Shui Yao Yao, Feng Shang, and Uncle Ian stood beside this group of people. In just half an hour, they could see the exhaustion of these girls. They could also see the unyielding spirit beneath the exhaustion. They could finally put down the burden on their bodies. "It's still the team, Captain has a way." Baby Feng tilted his head, refusing to admit that his eyes were red. Yin Wuiao didn't say anything because he saw the figure that flashed across the screen. The one holding the laptop. Even though the captain in his police uniform had attracted most of the attention, the silver hair and the typing hands still showed that he was the little captain. Indeed, the little captain was involved in this case, but even so, Li Shui didn't think much of it. Her family had professionals who would fight this case for her. At most, she would come out and apologize again. Anyway, there were still people on her side in the discussion group. However, Li Shui didn't know that. After leaving the police station, the first thing Bojio did was to transfer a sum of money to the girls and everything that Li Shui had said, including the evidence that the thornhead youngster had sent her. "I hope you can win." This was probably the only case that Bojio didn't use the internet to solve. Because it was worth entrusting it to someone else. Smith's face was swollen from the slap. The so-called power of taking over Qin Mo didn't have any practical purpose. Li Shui's fate wouldn't be revealed immediately. It would have to go through the procedures. But there were already some people who felt that from now on, they couldn't be anyone's accomplices. Even if they were young, they had to have a basic sense of right and wrong. After she was done, Bojio received a call from Sister Turtle. Her corpse has been cremated and she passed away peacefully. Even though Auntie is still sad, her eyes are filled with other emotions. The girls have done the calculations, you have given too much money. They will donate the remaining money from the lawsuit to other original creators who want to fight for their rights. Also, thank you, Big Spade. She helped me in the past, Bojio said suddenly. I just found out about it so you don't have to thank me. I'm just repaying her. Sister Turtle laughed lightly, looking at her friend's smiling photo. I've decided to start writing again. I'll write this experience into a story. What do you think? Bojio had never been a writer, but after some thought, she replied, not bad. You'll be the main character. Huh. Ha ha ha, my Big Spade is so cute. After hanging up, Bojio tugged at her silver hair. Qin Mo arched a brow. What happened? My fans want to publish a novel for me to be the main character. Bojio was still in her previous state. Qin Mo glanced at the youngster. Isn't it official? Official? Why wasn't she aware? Chapter 945. The next moment, a light kiss came, catching her off guard. It was a short moment, just the time it took for the traffic light to turn red. The minty tobacco scent and the slight coolness on her lips seeped into her mouth. At this moment, Qin Mo was still in his police uniform, the curve of his face looking different from the light behind him. Her heart raced and her mind went blank for a second. When Bojio came back to her senses, Qin Mo had already widened the distance between them. She came face to face with his dark brows and beautiful thin lips. She could still smell his scent. The lights at the junction started to change. Qin Mo seemed to be smiling, starting the car. From the corner of his eyes, she could see the youngster's ears gradually turning red. Bojio felt that the heat had to die down. She coughed lightly, whipping out her phone. She first glanced at the news. The heat regarding the case had yet to die down. There were both good and bad comments. She paused slightly before shifting her gaze away, intending to read the competition novels that the Almighty had mentioned on the official website. There were indeed quite a few. It wasn't just her, there were novels from Lin Feng and Yunhu as well. Bojio clicked on a novel about her and the Almighty. She only read the first 3 chapters. When she reached the 4th chapter, she felt that something was amiss. Why did the novel describe her as a cold young man? It was a complete reversal of the CP. The novel was written by a member of the club. Basically, it followed the rules of esports novels. They only wrote about her interactions with the Almighty during competitions. For some reason, it seemed like a pure love novel. Both she and the Almighty were like that. Lin Feng and Yunhu's were probably even more so. Bojio arched a brow. She clicked on a novel and was about to read it when her phone rang. Unexpectedly, his phone rang. The caller ID was Lin Feng. Bojio pressed the answer button. Lin Feng's voice came from the other end, looking as though he was facing a formidable enemy. Little Spade, you have to take me in tonight. Let me sleep at your house. Sleep at my house? Bojio arched a brow. Why do you suddenly want to sleep at my house? We've known each other for a long time. I'm a senior and you're a junior. It's time for the two of us to have a heart-to-heart talk. Let's have a pajama party or something. I'll provide alcohol to help you reduce your burden before the competition. You don't have to thank me too much. You can tell me anything you want. Lin Feng stuttered for a while, then lowered his voice and said, You're right. Bojio shifted her phone to the other side. She spoke slowly but got straight to the point. If you tell me the real reason, I might consider letting you go. Lin Feng paused, then stuffed the clothes in his hands into his bag. Yun who has gone crazy, he was reading a novel on his phone. I thought it was a good novel, so I took a look out of curiosity. I didn't expect it to be about him and me. He even said that when he had time, he would try everything in the novel on me. I gave him a kick. My mom came in and thought I was bullying him. To prevent me from losing control and crippling him before the competition, little spade, you have to take me in. Lin Feng paused, then stuffed the clothes in his hands into his bag. Yun who has gone crazy. Lin Feng paused, stuffing the clothes in his hands into his bag. Qin Mo, who was sitting beside Bojo, could hear the voice coming from the phone. In the end, it was because Lin Feng was gritting his teeth. Qin Mo didn't want anyone to disturb their time alone. He arched a brow. Are you sure you're not afraid of Yun who forcing you to do something? Lin Feng hadn't expected the voice to be his captain. When he heard Qin Mo's words, he jumped up like a cat. Why would I be afraid of him? Don't be afraid, you can sleep at home. Qin Mo's tone didn't change. Bojo shook her head. Lin Feng wasn't a match for the Almighty at his level. However, there were still benefits to being naive. Captain, what are you talking about? The signal isn't good. That's all, get little spade to prepare, I'll be there in a while. With a snap, Lin Feng hung up the phone. It was obvious that he didn't want to play along with the Almighty. He was quick to escape. Bojo sighed internally. When she turned, she realized that the Almighty's eyes had darkened. Someone was going to be in trouble. Qin Mo turned the steering wheel. I'm going to your house today. Bojo wanted to say, it's fine, I'll be fine. The Almighty added, Lin Feng likes to put his arm around someone's shoulder. Do you want him to find out that you're the girl who kissed me at the ball? Bojo imagined Lin Feng's expression and words if he found out about it. She hid it instantly. But she was the one who was kissed. How did the Almighty make it sound like they were kissing? At this moment, Qin Mo's phone rang. It was a call from Director Huang. The crime squad couldn't find the first suspect in the video. Even though they had sent him the video, they couldn't find him. There wasn't a single trace of him in the country's files. Besides, there was another important piece of information. The maiden's sacrifice isn't just happening in our country. Today, we received a secret report from a neighboring country. There are people in Japan who have fallen into the maiden's sacrifice as well. Many of them are being lured to commit suicide. Similar to what we saw today, there is a website dedicated to gathering such people. Then, they would open a post to record their actions. It would affect people's values and from there, it would destroy the victim's mental defenses, causing a large number of suicides. Those who joined seem to have been brainwashed and are extremely evil. The Japanese have found the website, but after destroying it, there would still be another. Unless the source of the organization is found, the affected people would still join. Someone left a comment saying, "Go to hell, it's useless to live like this. Other than Almighty, no one is clean. If you want to save Almighty, you have to follow Almighty's will." Almighty? Qin Mo asked faintly. Who? Director Huang sighed. They are adamant that their Almighty is Z. Bojo could hear the voice, but she didn't show it. Even now, she hadn't forgotten that the Almighty was still suspicious of her. He could still see through her expression. As expected, Qin Mo stopped the car at the side. He glanced at the youngster before pressing the Bluetooth earpiece. Are there any suspicious terrorist organizations in Japan? No. Director Huang was slightly worried because he had seen such a method before. Back then, people had used tarot cards to choose their targets in high schools. Back then, they had used the internet to control people's thoughts and hypnotize them. They had lured people to commit suicide, and in the end, the high school had sunk into unprecedented chaos. Everyone seemed to have been hatched by the murderer and were extremely dangerous. Back then, it hadn't been as serious as it was now. But it was still the work of a hacker. It had been the same 3 years ago, at that time, more than half of the students in the high school had been brainwashed while the other half had been brought to the border. The students weren't the only ones affected. There were teachers as well. People often said that staying with the devil for too long would turn you into a devil. No country would allow such a thing to happen. So many of their citizens had been controlled. They had to think of a way to save them. But as they were at the border, the terrain was complicated and normal soldiers wouldn't be able to handle it. Besides, it wasn't just a battle, they had to consider the fact that the other party was a psychologist. Hence, the mission had fallen onto Chin Mo's shoulders. It was a mission that no one was willing to recall. In that mission, some special forces soldiers saw with their own eyes that the hostages who were originally taken away were subtly influenced to become the same kind of people as those people. Their almost numb and passionate faces looked as if they had been bewitched. In reality, those who felt that stealing from others wasn't wrong were easily influenced and turned into devils. In the country, some believed in Buddhism, some believed in Taoism, and some believed in karma. All of these beliefs were telling the world that evil would result in evil. They had to know how to differentiate between right and wrong and not be a sinner. Why was that? Because there were too many people who couldn't differentiate between right and wrong. It could even be said that he would impose his dark thoughts on others. That was the reason why people with twisted views were the scariest. But under normal circumstances, there was another characteristic of people with twisted views. That was stupidity. They would easily believe the words that others said out of vanity. If it was a psychologist, it would be a piece of cake to find them. In the end, all the hostages were rescued. But it was at the cost of Chin Mo's amnesia. No one knew where the knot in his heart was. The people above were also worried that he had been subconsciously hypnotized by the other party. Regardless of the suspicion, it turned into regret in the end. Chin Mo's amnesia was selective, which meant that the case existed in his mind but he couldn't remember what he had forgotten. But now, Director Huang wasn't the only one who found the case familiar. Chin Mo found it familiar too. When the sense of familiarity surged into his mind, a piercing pain shot through his brain. Chin Mo frowned instinctively, reaching out to press his temples. In that instant, his entire face turned pale. Fragmented images flashed across his mind, making it impossible for him to catch them. But one of the images turned into a dark river. He seemed to be trying to catch something but he couldn't catch it no matter how hard he tried. At that moment, Chin Mo's eyes became a lot lighter. His pupils constricted, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Bo Jiao was sitting beside him. When she called Chin Mo the first time, he didn't react at all. It was as though he had fallen into a nightmare from a long time ago. Brother Mo, Bo Jiao called him 5 times. That was when Chin Mo pulled himself back from the scene. Director Huang heard the commotion and asked anxiously, "Did something happen? Do you need me to go over?" "It's fine." Chin Mo finally returned to his normal state. Director Huang wasn't in the car, so he wasn't aware of what had happened. "You really scared me, I thought something happened." "Nothing." Chin Mo caressed the side of his face, his voice weaker. "Other than that, what other information do you have?" Director Huang looked at the sealed document in his hands. The hacking should have started in Asia before spreading to the other continents. The situation in the Japanese is serious and there is already a large number of suicides. They aren't able to control it completely. What you and young Master Fu did today has undoubtedly hindered the development of the organization in our country, disrupting their plan to use this incident to brainwash some people. Hence, the situation in our country isn't uncontrollable. But if we don't find the mastermind, the website won't be destroyed. Even if we destroy it today, there will be a new one tomorrow. The Japanese intend to provide technical support if we manage to capture the suspect in the video. It's fine, their support won't help. Chin Mo turned the car. "Let's head back." "Us?" It wasn't hard to guess, it was probably young Master Fu. Indeed. But Chin Mo's reaction had caused her to frown. Ever since then, it hadn't eased up. What exactly was it that made the Almighty so happy? Bojo was smart. Her intuition told her that the Almighty had lost his memory. But the Almighty's identity was too unique. Hoshino wasn't able to find anything. How exactly did the Almighty end up in this state? But there was one thing. 3 years ago, the Almighty had worked on a case. Because of that case, the Almighty hadn't just missed the National League, he had also been resting at home for a long period of time. Was it related to that case? That was the only guess Bojo could come up with. When they reached the crime squad, they realized the tension in the air. This time, the case wasn't just a slap to Smith's face, it had also allowed Chin Mo to enter and leave the crime squad freely. Bojo noticed that the person speaking to Director Huang wasn't from the crime squad. He was from the Japanese. Based on their accent, she could tell that they were from the Japanese. Director Huang caught sight of them and walked over with his men. He turned to Chin Mo, these two are Interpol officers from the Japanese. Before this, we had already searched all the places where Jiang City's tall and slender man would appear, but without his real identity, it's hard to find him. Do you have any ideas? Chin Mo didn't reply immediately, instead turning towards the youngster beside him. Can we use the internet to find him? The tall and thin man in the video? I can give it a try. Bojo glanced up. I'll continue with the videos I found at the roadside shop. Based on the route he would take, I'll be able to get a rough idea of where he would appear and see if there are any records of him. I'll do it. Chin Mo's voice was calm. Where do you think he will end up? Bojo replied, all right. As an Interpol officer, even if they weren't from the same country, they could understand their conversation. But could they really find him? Chapter 946. Of course, this youngster could be a special talent. But when this special talent picked up the laptop, the two Interpol officers glanced at each other and shook their heads. They knew it was impossible to use the internet to find out his identity. If it was so easy, they wouldn't have come to China. Their country's hacking skills were the best in Asia. This youngster was just a Chinese, his computer skills were definitely not as good as theirs. In the words of the Chinese, this seemed like a child's play in front of an expert. However, the two Interpol officers from Japan didn't say anything. Firstly, it was because of their country's etiquette. Secondly, they were here to learn from this side's experience. They wanted to know how the other side had stopped the spread of the maiden sacrifice. According to what they knew, there was a profiler who was good at deduction that changed the outcome. It could be said that these two Japanese only wanted to fight for Chin Mo. Hence, they didn't know that there was another person who had helped Chin Mo. To Bojo, being in the crime squad's IP made it easier for her to investigate. That was because the surveillance cameras of some departments could be checked by the public security system. As long as she added some hacking skills, she would be able to continue her investigation. But it would be a waste of time to have someone perform facial recognition one by one to confirm the pattern of the person's appearance. On the other hand, a skilled hacker would use a human face to form a photo and use the data to track that person. But just as Chin Mo had said, the profiler's judgment was needed. This meant that once the camera appeared, the person would probably appear at the next location. Based on the person's appearance at that time, they would be able to analyze his movements. Bojo's typing speed was fast. With her connection to the crime squad, she broke through the electronic systems along the streets. These systems didn't just include convenience stores, there were also ATMs and surveillance cameras installed in the parking lot. The return of the young lord of the hacker world meant that there would be people following her. Many people should be aware that a large-scale network attack couldn't be completed by just one hacker. It was just like a game, which required assistance. But the only thing that couldn't be missing was the leader. The leader, who was like an eagle, could not miss any information, could break through and discern all network defenses, and could even escape nimbly. She would catch her prey swiftly. This had always been Bojo's style. It was cold and sharp, but it didn't lose its mind. The naked eye couldn't see the wires on the network. When Bojo took off, he couldn't see the other symbols flying behind her. Perhaps their behavior was different, but their purpose was the same, and that was to assist their young master. With Z's command, the others would transform into different forms to break through the defenses around them and obtain useful information. They were all gathered on Bojo, who was at the front. Hand speed was not the ultimate test of a hacker. Instead, it was how to use the code to fly faster and higher and finally lock onto the prey. Even the people behind him were blocked by layers of firewalls after collecting the information. They needed time to solve the problem. Bojo didn't stop until the entire screen changed from a series of codes to a series of video clips. Every single clip had a tall and slender figure. The expressions of the two Interpol officers standing at the side changed. It wasn't that they didn't understand the internet. It was just that they had never thought that there would be such a hidden expert in Huaxia. Even in Japan, there might not be anyone who could reach such a level of computing. No, it would be more accurate to say that none of the international experts they had seen could achieve such a feat in such a short period of time. Qin Mo stood beside Bojo, one hand on one side of her body. His handsome face was noble, but when he lowered his gaze, there was a sharp glint in his eyes. Especially when his gaze landed on the screen, it seemed to penetrate one's heart. Very quickly, Bojo realized that the reason the Almighty was a top student wasn't just because of his intelligence. Also, his browsing speed was extremely fast, Bojo clicking on the images one by one. Qin Mo's gaze didn't stop, he was looking at the speed of Bojo's speed. In that instant, the two Interpol officers only had one thought: the two hunks were in their line of work. As for them, they weren't even able to use their skills. Instead, they felt shocked. What exactly was the reason? The two Interpol officers couldn't find an answer because the two of them weren't in their records. But why hadn't such talents been discovered? One of the Interpol officers couldn't help but ask, wanting to find out more about the two of them. He turned towards Director Huang. What do they do? One of them was a high school student while the other was a business CEO. It wasn't enough to say it out loud. Director Huang hesitated for a moment, finally finding a common answer. Professional esports player. Esports players? The two Interpol officers hadn't expected such a profession. Esports? Gaming? Director Huang caressed his nose, finding it unbelievable. They have a competition the day after tomorrow. If you are interested, you can take a look. The Interpol officers glanced at each other. Let's catch them first. The most important thing now was to stop the maiden's sacrifice. It had to be said that Qin Mo and Bojo's teamwork was indeed pleasing to the eye. The two of them were already very handsome, and with their movements, they exuded a kind of aura that seemed to be innate. One of them was devilish while the other was abstinent. Their aura seemed to complement each other. Stop. When Qin Mo said this word, Mo Roa's eyes widened. The youngster raised his right hand swiftly, his coordination was very high. Qin Mo looked at the few photos and closed his eyes. It was as though he could form a concrete image in his mind. The image turned from illusory to real. When he encountered something that didn't make sense, he had to quickly change his train of thought. If it was the left, there was no need for such a hurried back view. He was even more anxious when he hailed a cab. Why so anxious? If the direction wasn't left, then it would be right. What's on the right? Qin Mo tilted his head, searching for some images. Hospitals, shopping malls, a direct flight to the airport? When the last word appeared in his mind, he felt a chill run down his spine. Qin Mo suddenly opened his eyes. His tone wasn't fast, but it was deep. He went to the airport. Airport? It wasn't just Interpol, even Director Huang didn't think it was possible. If this person really appeared at the airport, how could he not be noticed? After all, his image had already been sent out and there would be a nationwide search. Qin Mo knew what they were thinking. He glanced at Director Huang. There's a spy inside and he knows how to disguise himself. We will need the cooperation of the airport, especially the international ones. Check which flights are about to take off and stop him at the security checkpoint. We have to keep the operation a secret. There should be people at the airport. Interpol was the most concerned about the spy. His expression changed. Director Huang, you never said there's a spy inside. Such matters couldn't be known to outsiders. Director Huang was able to reach his current position, basically speaking the truth to whoever he met, and whoever he met spoke the truth to. Internal matters couldn't be told to outsiders. Besides, there were boundaries between the two countries. But it wasn't appropriate for Director Huang to say anything. Qin Mo spoke again. Ever since the maiden's sacrifice, there will be a spy inside. There's one in the Japanese department as well. Or have you never thought about why every operation ends in failure? It was a very light rhetorical question, but the two Interpol officers were taken aback. They had thought about it before, but every single time, it's time to act. Director Huang didn't give the Interpol any time to think. In reality, time was precious to everyone. Including the tall and slender man, who had reached the airport. He had undergone a disguise, his face was slightly altered and even his clothes were the same. There was a black Bluetooth earpiece on his right ear. The Bluetooth earpiece was a sign that someone was guiding him. There aren't any policemen on your left, but there's a bookstore on your right. Go in and flip through some books to avoid the cameras. The girl sounded anxious. There's still an hour before the plane takes off. 5 minutes later, head to the security checkpoint. I will tamper with the scanner so they won't be able to confirm your features and appearance. Of course, it won't be a problem even if you imagine it. There are people there as well. As long as you don't cause too much of a commotion, you will be able to board the plane successfully. Once you board the plane, they won't be able to stop you. According to international aviation law, even if someone wants to investigate you, it will only be America. China doesn't have to be afraid of America, we have a professional lawyer to help us. The most dangerous part is before you board the plane, you have to avoid all the security guards. Alright. It wasn't just the girl, even the tall and slender man was starting to panic. He hadn't expected the Chinese police to be able to lock onto him. Regardless of where he was, news of him was being broadcasted. He was wanted throughout the entire country, it was impossible for him to escape. How exactly did they manage to find him? There weren't any cameras in the corridor of the dead man. He wouldn't have been caught there. Could it be that the person above betrayed us? The tall and slender man asked darkly. The girl paused before replying, no one would give up on a huge profit and he isn't an exception. The only person who wouldn't betray us is that person. Just like the higher-ups in the Japanese, the higher they are, the more they want. The reason you were found was probably because someone used internet technology to pull up all the places that the dead man passed by. You would definitely appear there. With Qin Mo around, it wouldn't be strange if he found you. What's strange is who exactly found those places. There must be someone else that we haven't noticed. Our plan has been foiled several times, the most dangerous time was when someone almost found me. I'm still not sure if that person has started to locate me. The only university beside the internet cafe is our university. I have no idea what information the boss of the internet cafe revealed to that person. But one thing is for sure, if it's the same person, we have to think about who is looking for us other than Qin Mo. After you go to America, take a flight back to the Golden Triangle. Get someone to help me check if there's anyone whose hacking skills are on par with mine. Alright, the tall and slender man replied. Everything will have to wait until I leave. The girl was still listening to the tall and slender man's words when she saw a huge wave of police officers heading towards his direction. His voice grew anxious. There's someone in front of you, turn right. Do you see the security checkpoint? Don't look back, and don't show any strange expressions. Find a way to chat with the people around you and make them think that you are traveling abroad with a companion. There should be a tour group where you are queuing up, and the clothes you are wearing are from their tour group. Now, blend in and follow the tour group in. The security officer is one of us, so he won't take the initiative to expose you. You must be fast." After hearing the girl's words, the tall and slender man quickly changed his direction and strode toward the most eye-catching spot. People who were going on a trip would be in a better mood and would be less guarded, especially when they saw someone wearing the same clothes as them. The tall and slender man was good at talking too. He found someone to chat with casually and said with a smile, "I've learned some daily language before this. Uncle and Auntie, if there's anything you don't know, I'll translate for you if you want to buy something when you get there." He didn't just randomly pick these two elderly people to talk to. That was because, in terms of age, the tall and slender man was just right for people to mistake him for the old couple's son. Moreover, the old people were not xenophobic. They could start a conversation after a few words, especially when someone asked, "Are you guys chatting to register for the tour group?" The old man smiled. "Actually, other than going on a trip, my wife and I also want to see if our grandson is used to studying there." From afar, the security officers did not know what they were talking about. When the tall and slender man helped the old man to carry his bag through the security check, the security officers who arrived only glanced over. After all, in their minds, the person they wanted to arrest must be a single person. Thus, no one saw the disdainful smile on the tall and slender man's lips after exchanging glances with one of the security officers. So what if they had locked onto him? He still managed to escape. China's security was only so-so. Chapter 947. What's more, the boarding of the international flights had already begun. The police officers were still checking in at the security checkpoint. After all, there would be facial scans at the security checkpoint. If he was a criminal, he would definitely be identified. It would be fine if he was facing a normal criminal. After all, his ID and face wouldn't change. But they didn't know that the person they were facing was an international criminal. The tall and slender man had at least 5 IDs and corresponding IDs. He knew how to disguise himself. Moreover, the police officers wouldn't expect him to be hiding in the tour group. Therefore, even if there were people going back and forth looking for him, no one would really notice him. Why are there so many special police officers all of a sudden? Is there something wrong? There shouldn't be so many special police officers usually, right? I'm not sure, but he's so handsome. The appearance of the large number of special police officers caused the people in the airport to start discussing. Gradually, the people also realized that the security today seemed to be especially strict. There were also special police officers patrolling near the boarding gates. At the same time, there were 3 planes flying abroad. And the distance between each boarding gate was very far. It was also a problem to decide which one to control. Moreover, international flights were different from domestic flights. Sometimes, even the control had to do diplomatic work in advance. Before getting the documents, no one had any right to stop anyone from entering the plane. At most, they could find an excuse to delay the flight, but they couldn't cancel the flight. Obviously, the police officers were still worried. In the end, 2 people went to each boarding gate. They still didn't see the target. The tall and slender man held the registration card and followed behind the 2 old men. They talked and laughed as they walked into the boarding gate. The special police officer reached out and stopped him. He glanced at his ID and face, then looked at the old man behind him. At that moment, the tall and slender man's palms were sweating. But he believed that God still cared for him. The special police officer didn't stare at him for long. He quickly gave him a hand gesture. The tall and slender man smiled and said, "Thank you." With a smile on his face, he walked into the boarding gate. Then, he went through the built passage and walked directly in the direction of the plane. The beautiful space station was in front of the cabin, welcoming all the passengers with great etiquette. Once he got on the plane, it would be harder for those people to find him. The tall and slender man found a seat by the window and sat down. He raised his hand to look at the watch on his wrist and calculated the time. In the airport, Director Huang's expression wasn't good. "No suspicious person?" "Yes, Chief, we have searched everywhere." During the security check, we found some people who brought some things onto the plane. They were all detained by us, but the people who were detained are not suspects. Director Huang's breathing deepened. Are you sure there isn't anyone suspicious? He is definitely at the airport. Qin Mo's reasoning had never been wrong. How could it not be possible? Director Huang, we've really sent people to every security checkpoint. The information from the airport is the same, this person hasn't appeared. Director Huang's face turned stern. Continue the search. There's no need to look for the security checkpoint. An indifferent voice rang out. Director Huang turned around, spotting Qin Mo standing in the middle with one hand stuffed into his trouser pocket, his eyes fixed on the clock. His side profile was still handsome and elegant, attracting everyone's attention immediately. Moreover, there was a youngster with a unique hair color standing beside him. However, Bojio's reaction was faster. When she saw someone looking in her direction, she took off her black hooded top and pulled the hood up, revealing only her clean curves. Even her eyelashes, which were as fine as a crow's feather, couldn't be seen. It had to be said that the hood had a certain concealment effect, mainly because it suppressed the color of her hair. Qin Mo was still wearing his well-ironed police uniform, which didn't stand out in such a setting since the people around were all police officers. Besides, no one would think of Supreme Alliance's captain as a police officer. Hence, when they saw him, their attention was slightly diverted. Bojio took a step towards Qin Mo, trying her best to reduce her presence. Her silver hair was handsome, but it was easy to expose her identity. Qin Mo seemed to understand the youngster's intentions. He reached out and pressed on the man's head, pulling him towards him before turning to Director Huang. At this time, the plane should be boarding. Based on the time he left, there are only 3 available flights. He should have passed the security checkpoint by now. That isn't possible. If he had passed the security checkpoint, we would definitely be able to tell. Be it the airport staff or our colleagues, they didn't find anyone similar to him. The 2 Interpol officers were anxious. With his words, they wanted to take action because deep down, they agreed with Qin Mo's point of view. According to the standards of an international criminal, there was a possibility of a certain level of disguise. Someone who was able to create a case like the maiden's sacrifice definitely wasn't simple. It was highly possible that the criminal had boarded one of the planes. If they followed the route provided by the profiler, their guess was the highest possibility. They had to board the plane immediately and arrest the suspect. Otherwise, once they alighted from the plane and entered America, many things would be out of their control. Hence, no matter what, they had to start the arrest, even if they had to use their identity as Interpol officers. Of course, Qin Mo knew what they were thinking. His tone was calm. This is China and the people on the plane are all Chinese. If the criminal has boarded the plane, all the passengers on the plane might become hostages. According to international practice, you have the right to ask for our cooperation, but we, China, still have the initiative. Hearing this, the 2 Interpol officers were taken aback. They hadn't expected that before they could open their mouths, their words would be stuffed back into their throats. The reason that was at the tip of their tongues was forcefully swallowed back into their throats. Qin Mo was indeed referring to international rules. How did he know about international rules? Director Huang listened by the side. You mean the criminal is already on the plane? Based on his understanding of the aloof youngster, he wouldn't have said that if it wasn't the case. Qin Mo glanced at the time, his voice still calm. There is a 90% chance he is on the plane. Go ask which plane is preparing to depart. With that, Qin Mo turned his head and looked at the youngster beside him. The youngster's hands were stuffed into her long jacket, the hooded top covering most of her face. It wasn't clear what she was looking at. She was staring at a spot like a curious little kid. In that instant, Qin Mo seemed to have recalled something. It was a blurry feeling. The miniature version of a certain someone seemed to have been like this before, staring at a spot with her eyes wide open, her little face smeared with paint. It was very, very familiar. Here it comes again. Chin Mo furrowed his brows as though he was coming back to reality. He paused for a moment before walking towards the youngster. What are you looking at? Bojo lifted her chin, gesturing for Chin Mo to look at the group of people going through the security check. The distinguishing feature of the group was that everyone was wearing the same t-shirt. Some of them were wearing a hat, while others were not. I think we can start with these people. If they want to avoid being tracked and board the plane safely, they either have to disguise themselves as staff or a member of the group. I'm more inclined to the latter. If it's the former, it's impossible for that person to disguise himself as a stewardess. Someone as handsome as Brother Mo and I would be more likely. She didn't forget to praise herself for her analysis. Only a certain someone would do such a thing. But Chin Mo lifted his lips, his left hand pressing down on the youngster's head. I agree with you. With that, he turned towards the Special Forces officer beside him. According to your records, which of the 3 planes has a tour group? Reporting, young Master Chin, there are 2, both of them are from American Airlines. Which of the 2 planes takes off first? Director Huang, go and negotiate with them, try to get half an hour to an hour's time. Chin Mo said this because he knew the other party had agreed to the same amount as well. Director Huang wasn't confident. This isn't a domestic airline, it's an international route and isn't a local airline. Even the airline is from America, I'm afraid they wouldn't be willing to give up so much time. Chin Mo asked for the name of the Special Forces airline before he dialed a number from his contact list. It was an international call. Very quickly, a deep voice came from the other end. It was spoken in authentic English. Chin, what is it? Is there a business collaboration? If it's a project from your family, we won't reject anyone, no matter how much. William, I'm not looking for you to discuss a project. One of your company's planes has met with some problems in our country. I would like you to help me get an hour to delay the departure by half an hour to an hour. William smiled. What's so important? Are you going to chase after an escaped girl? That's how it is on the television. An hour is too long, I can get them to delay by half an hour. All right. I'll make the arrangements now, treat it as me returning the favor. Chin Mo hung up, turning towards the Special Forces and Director Huang. The plane will be delayed by half an hour, we need someone who is good at identifying disguises. I can't go up, the other party might recognize me and be wary of me. Is there anyone who is good at that? The Special Forces were indeed good at identifying disguises, but they weren't that good. Bojo glanced over, no one raised their hands. Brother Mo, what do you think of me? The youngster smiled devilishly, her words sharp. Everyone on the plane has become his hostage. If he knows how to fly, once he notices something amiss in the cabin, he would take action. Hence, it wouldn't be suitable for him to wear a police uniform. I'm the only one he doesn't know. Even if he sees me, he would only treat me as a passenger and wouldn't have any resistance. Time trickled by. At this moment, in the cabin, the tall and slender man seated by the window was starting to get impatient, getting more and more impatient at times like this. Everything was over, but the plane still hadn't taken off. The tall and slender man reached for the light, calling the air stewardess over. The air stewardess's smile was perfect. Sir, do you need a blanket? Or is there anything else you need? No. It's just 10 minutes before the plane takes off. The tall and slender man couldn't sit still, asking the air stewardess to check her watch. Why isn't the cabin door closed yet? The stewardess lowered her body again. I'm sorry, sir. Our plane has encountered some procedural irregularities. In addition, there are still passengers who haven't come in yet. We're in the midst of final adjustments. Please forgive us for the inconvenience. Procedural inconveniences? The tall and slender man repeated, arching a brow. He decided to wait for another 10 minutes. If the plane wasn't closing up after 10 minutes, it would be time for him to consider his next move. Based on the current situation, the old couple beside him were the best hostages. Their ability to resist was one thing, and the other was that they didn't have any powerful weapons on them. If he had a weapon, he wouldn't be able to get away with it. Therefore, holding one of the old couple hostage wouldn't just be within his control, it would also allow him to kill 10 police officers. However, he still had to wait and see. After all, if he held a hostage here, it would mean that his situation wouldn't be as perfect as it seemed. He still had to cooperate with the Chinese police. He was probably overthinking. The other party couldn't possibly know that he had already boarded the plane. They must still be checking him at the security checkpoint and boarding gate, the tall and slender man thought, and looked towards the cabin door. Indeed, there were still people who hadn't boarded. What the air stewardess had said was probably true. The delay was probably due to the system adjustment. There was no problem in the cabin. He could wait a little longer. If the special forces were to enter, he wouldn't wait for them to recognize him. Once he saw them, he would take action immediately. The 10 minutes passed extremely slowly for the tall and slender man. When the 8 minutes were up, he looked at his watch again. It wasn't just him, the others were also asking the air stewardess for the reason. However, the air stewardess gave the same explanation. No one noticed that at this moment, a youngster appeared at the cabin door. The youngster lowered his eyes and only his chin could be seen. His face was covered, but from this angle, he gave off an unruly vibe. The hood covered the youngster's hair color, making him look mysterious. When the air stewardess said welcome aboard, she was slightly stunned, thinking that the youngster was a celebrity. Chapter 948. As the last passenger to board the plane, Bojo didn't keep a low profile. Instead, it suited her image as a hedonistic young master. When she had been alone, she had been rather unrestrained. But she wasn't sure if it was because of her childhood memories, but the moment she was in front of the Almighty, she wanted to show her best side. In order to conquer her little sweetheart, she had to be mindful of her image. International flights were usually large passenger planes. As she walked from the beginning to the end, Bojo's gaze locked onto the group of tourists wearing the same top. She only had 5 minutes left. After 5 minutes, the cabin door would close and the plane would take off. She had to confirm who the culprit was within 5 minutes, and she couldn't make a mistake. If she did, there would be more trouble. Disguise was one of Bojo's specialties. She held a small leather suitcase in one hand and a boarding pass in the other. In fact, it was just a piece of blank paper that was cut out at the last minute. But it was this piece of paper that she looked at as if she was looking for her seat. Because of this, her gaze could naturally fall on every seat, and she wouldn't be suspected. The youngster walked from the front of the plane to the back of the airport casually. But in reality, she was continuously collecting and analyzing information. Her brain worked quickly. It was obvious that the age group of the tourists was on the older side. And the person they were looking for was between 23 to 27 years old. Of course, she didn't rule out the possibility of him disguising himself as an old or middle-aged man. Age could be changed through appearance, but the information revealed by the skin on the fingers and neck wouldn't change. And that person's figure, when people reached old age, they would naturally shorten their bodies. If they were tall, they would have a tendency to stoop. The elderly in this group didn't meet the standard height. That left the middle-aged man. Bojo narrowed her eyes. Under normal circumstances, if it were her, she would also dress up as a middle-aged man. She could disguise herself as an old man for a short period of time, but the flight would take a long time. It would be easy to be noticed. It wasn't easy to alight from the plane, and they had to enter the country from America. Hence, the target was shortened to 5, regardless of gender. But the culprit was a man. She couldn't rule out the possibility of him being a woman. First, she had to see if the middle-aged woman was really a woman. Many people looked at the Adam's apple when judging a man or woman. Because sometimes, some men's Adam's apple wasn't obvious. The woman also had a bulge on her neck, but it wasn't an Adam's apple. To differentiate between men and women, one had to look at their bone structure and figure. As someone who often disguised as a man, Bojo was very experienced. Hence, she never wore short sleeves. This was the only way she could fool the Almighty. Fortunately, the two at the airport were both wearing skirts. From the joints of the arms and some of the forms, the waist and legs collapsed. Women of this age had all given birth before, so one could definitely tell the difference in their pelvis. When Bojo glanced over, she thought that everything was normal. There were only 3 of them left. What made her uncertain were the 2 middle-aged men sitting beside the 2 old men. Whether it was the state of the skin or the body shape, it was impossible to tell who the problem was. This was beyond her ability to discern. Chapter 949. The stewardess's voice rang out once more, signaling for the passengers to return to their seats. She had to find the culprit before the cabin door closed. Bojo had to drag the culprit down before the plane took off. Otherwise, what would happen to the National League? Once the plane took off, it would take more than a day for them to return. Was it the one on the left or the one on the right? Bojo pondered as she walked forward. She paused for a second. In that second, there was only one thought in her mind. If it was the Almighty, how would he differentiate? Actions were controlled by the person. Words and appearances could be deceiving. But his actions and micro-expressions were subconscious. This was when she had been very young. Her little canine pet had told her about it. At that time, she had been obsessed with dismantling keyboards and climbing walls. He had been the only one who had been leaning against the headboard like a little prince, dressed in pure white pajamas, reading a book that she couldn't understand. It had been like a bedtime story, reading to her. From time to time, he would pull himself away from the book, glancing at her sleepy eyes. Stupid. He wouldn't forget to pat her when he said those words. When she had been young, he had taught her half of the things she knew. Sometimes, humans were mysterious. The influence between them seemed to have been predestined from the start. Hence, when Bojo walked forward again, her dark gaze landed on their expressions and actions. Both of them were anxious. After all, everyone wanted to know when the plane would take off. However, after one of them raised his hand to look at the time, he began to play with his phone again, as if he was chatting. The other one turned towards Bojo, his gaze making it seem as though he had to be wary of anyone who entered. Bojo didn't avoid his gaze. Instead, she walked towards him with her boarding pass, just like an ordinary person looking for her seat. She walked forward with her small luggage, glancing at the seat number from time to time. Seeing this, the tall and slender man shifted his gaze back to his watch. After all, in his eyes, a high school student posed no threat at all. Moreover, the last person who came up was carrying a suitcase. If they were really here to capture him, they wouldn't take anything with them. The tall and slender man thought of the usual Interpol methods. But he wasn't aware of it. The young man in front of him was most familiar with how criminals thought. If she was the one escaping, she would also pay attention to the last person to enter the plane, and she would also observe who didn't take their luggage. Therefore, before entering the plane, the first thing she did was to grab a small suitcase. There was nothing in the suitcase, but she dragged it along to complete a layer of disguise. Bojo placed the suitcase down. She seemed to have found her position, but she wasn't sure. She glanced back and forth. At this moment, the tall and slender man was even less concerned. Listening to the countdown of the last minute, he flipped open the newspaper and was about to enjoy the moment of takeoff. The young man bent down, his silver hair faintly peeking out where his eyes were. The side of his face was as fair as jade, clean and handsome. "Sir, you seem to be sitting in the wrong seat. F12D, is this the right seat?" Bojo handed the boarding pass over. The tall and slender put down the newspaper and said in a normal voice, "This is my seat." "Your seat is behind me." "Really?" The youngster laughed, a sinister aura in her voice. "I don't think your seat should be here, it should be in prison." With that, the tall and slender man's expression changed. He held on to the old man beside him, wanting to use him as a hostage. But in that instant, there was a loud crack. His wrists, which were holding on to the newspaper, were locked together. The young man's movements were extremely fast. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, he directly pressed his entire head onto the small table. There was a loud bang. The tall and slender man was still in a state of shock. That was when he realized that the youngster wasn't holding a boarding pass, it was a piece of white paper. The old man beside him was the first to react, exclaiming in shock. The air stewardesses were even more eager to rush over to them. But before they could move, a tall and slender figure appeared in front of the cabin door. A tall and slender figure appeared in front of the cabin door. It was Chin-mo. He had been in the tunnel all along, waiting for this sound. No matter who went in, he could remain calm and unhurried. But when it was that guy, Chin-mo had to admit that he had been slightly worried. He had been worried that there might be something he hadn't predicted. He had been worried that the criminal might have a weapon. But from the looks of it, the operation was going smoothly. With such a person appearing in front of the cabin, the air stewardesses would definitely cover their mouths instinctively. Police case. Chin-mo had already taken Director Huang's identification. He raised his right hand, releasing his aura. Everyone, please remain seated. Can I trouble the people in the middle to move aside so my men can bring him out? With such a sudden turn of events, everyone's first reaction would be to stand up and watch. But after Chin-mo finished speaking, 6 to 7 special police officers appeared behind him. No one dared to move. The old couple who were closest to Bojio were in a state of shock. Bojio seemed to have noticed them. After knocking them out, she lifted them up forcefully. She didn't stay any longer. The tall and slender man was held down by 2 special police officers as he walked towards the cabin entrance. When he caught sight of Chin-mo, his dazed mind snapped back to reality. He turned around abruptly and looked at the young man from before. Silver hair, black eyes, and an eye-catching face. He was supposed to be their next target, the young master of the Fu family, who was closest to Chin-mo. But their information hadn't mentioned him. Not only did he know how to disguise himself, he was also skilled. Inexplicably, a chill ran down the tall and slender man's spine. How much exactly did they know about the youngster who was always by Chin-mo's side? According to the information, the youngster didn't just know how to play games, he seemed to have some knowledge of computers as well. It had been countless times that their plans had been forced to stop because of a single person's cyber attack. The other party had even changed their bomb sequence without them knowing. They hadn't even been able to find out the other party's identity. But now, the tall and slender man had a terrifying thought. If the person who had been disrupting their plans was this youngster, then the consequences. The tall and slender man didn't dare to continue the thought. His face was already covered by a black cloth. The moment the cabin door closed, Chin-mo reached out and pulled Bojio into his embrace. Chin-mo reached out and pulled Bojio into his arms, acting as though there was no one else around. The Interpol officers glanced at each other, seeing the shock in each other's eyes. They hadn't expected them to have such a relationship other than being battle partners. The 2 Interpol officers were desperate for information. Once they caught the tall and slender man, they would join the interrogation. Chin-mo didn't follow them because he knew they wouldn't speak so easily. Before leaving the airport, Chin-mo instructed Director Huang, check the accounts under his various identities. Who are their financial transactions with? Who are the most frequent financial transactions? Director Huang was smart. You're saying that the one he has the most frequent contact with is his superior? No. Chin-mo glanced at Director Huang, his voice calm. Under normal circumstances, there wouldn't be any financial dealings within an organization. The ones that do are their partners, for example, the traitor in the crime squad. The moment the word traitor was mentioned, Director Huang's expression turned solemn. I understand. Bojio sat at the front passenger seat, watching as Director Huang's figure grew smaller. She turned over. Little Huang really knows? If there really are financial dealings, it must be a huge sum. He would be able to know every single operation, and every single one of them is a crucial one. Otherwise, the news wouldn't have been leaked so quickly. This person could even make use of the new criminal psychologist to take away your authority. His position shouldn't be low. Indeed, it isn't low. At the very least, it would be someone of the same rank or above. Chin Mo made use of the red light to light a cigarette. He held it with one hand, his features sharp. He knows that it's just a few people. He knows about the politics of the government. Leaking information isn't something a single person can do. If the investigation starts, all the related personnel will be held accountable. Chin Mo took advantage of the time to wait for the traffic light to turn red. Behind every major case, there would be corruption. That was the reality in every country. As a hacker, Bojo knew it better than anyone else. But I didn't know high schoolers these days would know so much. The Almighty's casual comment made Bojo's heart flutter. She broke into a smile. There are so many movies and dramas, it's easy to understand. Corruption starts from the beginning, that's why there's an oversight. You know me, I love police dramas. Is that so? Chin Mo glanced at the youngster. I remember your bookshelf only has novels like Overbearing CEO Falls in Love with Me, there aren't any police dramas. Of course, she wouldn't read police dramas since the robbers would always be caught. Bojo didn't want to be caught. Just as she was thinking about how to reply without being discovered, a voice suddenly rang beside her ear. It seems like the things placed in the Fu family's house aren't what you like, it's what you liked in the past. Chin Mo's voice was calm. Sometimes, I really wonder if you're that young Master Fu. In that instant, the air in the car seemed to have frozen. The two men's eyes met. One was extremely deep. The other was so dark that it was translucent. Neither of them shifted their gazes away. Bojo's heart seemed to be nailed to the ground, beating slowly. Until the phone rang, Bojo broke into a faint smile. If I'm not me, who else can I be? Let's pick up the call. With that, Bojo tilted her head, placing the phone beside her ear. Regardless of who was calling, Bojo was grateful. The moment the call went through, a voice came through. Little Spade, where are you? I'm at your door, hurry over. Chapter 950. He didn't wait for her to speak before hanging up. Bojo reached for her phone. Chin Mo arched a brow. Lin phone? Chin Mo chuckled, but there wasn't much warmth in his eyes. Do you really intend to sleep there? From your tone, it sounds like it. Bojo watched the almighty's sculpted face, feeling an inexplicable sense of misfortune. Speaking of misfortune, Lin Feng really fit the description. Originally, he had left the house valiantly and slammed the door loudly, intending to stay in a hotel for 2 days. It's not like he doesn't have money, right? Who knew that he wouldn't have brought his wallet when he left the house? If he had money, he could take a taxi since he could pay with his phone. But he needed an identification card to stay in a hotel. He couldn't leave in the day and return at night. How could that be considered running away from home? It would be like a child playing house. But for him to return to get his identification card, it would be too embarrassing. Yunhu must be mocking him now. How could he be so hesitant to leave home? All the more reason why he couldn't return. He would definitely find fault with him. Even if he didn't find fault with him, he would definitely take a look at him. Not to mention the things written in the text. It was too frightening. He actually wanted to use those techniques on him. F***ck, did he really think he was a pushover? That was why he had to wander outside. Thinking of this, Lin Feng kicked the wall heavily. The kick was so painful that his entire body arched. F***ck. This was the scene that Chin Mo and Bojo saw when they drove back. Honestly, only a naive person would kick a wall when they couldn't get over it. Lin Feng's existence was the perfect definition of that word. Bo Jiao rolled down the car window. She leaned against the window and whistled. After hearing the whistle, Lin Feng's first reaction was to look behind him. He saw the silver-haired youngster sitting in the car, looking at him with a leisurely smile on his lips. This posture is really handsome. That's right. Lin Feng was about to say more when he realized that the car in front of him was familiar. When he took a closer look, he saw a noble and aloof face. All of a sudden, Lin Feng swallowed the words he wanted to say. F***ck, why didn't Little Spade tell him that Captain was here too? Lin Feng knew how to restrain himself in front of Qin Mo. For example, he didn't place his arm around Little Spade's body like he usually did. Instead, when they reached the living room, he started to complain. Anyway, I don't plan to go back. Arrange a room for me. Bo Jiao glanced at Lin Feng, thinking that he wouldn't be able to win against Almighty Yun at his level. He hadn't considered the possibility of him finding his way over. You don't know how miserable I've been lately. Lin Feng hugged the cushion on the sofa. He glanced up at the ceiling before turning to Bo Jiao. I'm a grown man and I still have to guard against my brother taking advantage of me. In the past, we could still talk about the weather and girls. When the room gets hot, we could remove our shirts whenever we wanted. We could play games or watch porn together. Now, I have to wrap myself up tightly at home. Let's not talk about putting our arms around each other's shoulders. If we were to get any closer, I would lose my integrity. Motherf asterisk cur, of all the things that guy could be thinking about, he just had to think about my chrysanthemum. Bo Jiao didn't say a word. She just smiled. Little submissive Lin looked rather pitiful. Hey, Little Spade, do you have beer? Lin Feng didn't feel like he was suffering at all. He was the one attacking, wasn't he? Bo Jiao didn't want to laugh too much. She held her chin and arched a brow lazily. Yes, why? Give me a can first, I'm suffocating. Lin Feng placed the cushion at the side, his eyes bright. Qin Mo walked over and tossed a can of beer to Lin Feng. His tone was calm. Why? He doesn't even allow you to drink. That's not it. Without a second thought, Lin Feng pulled open the can of beer, tilted his head back, and drank a mouthful. I'm afraid I'll drink too much and give Yunhu another chance. He's not easy to deal with, so I have to stay sober. Qin Mo glanced at him, replying slowly, I see. Think about it, aren't I pitiful? I love drinking and eating meat skewers, but I'm not allowed to drink Budweiser. It's killing me, Lin Feng said, taking another sip. Qin Mo sat there, tossing another can of beer to him. Indeed, do you need someone to prepare some food to go with the alcohol? Lin Feng had never seen his captain so caring. Was it because of Little Spade? TSK. That was why people in love. It was unbelievable. But such a huge change in his captain was rather frightening. Lin Feng caressed his arm. It wasn't much, he just wanted to eat and drink to his heart's content. Everything else wasn't important to him. Chen Xiaodong stood at the side, confused. That wasn't it. What exactly did he hear? Almighty Yun had been thinking about Almighty Lin and he was so blatant about it. In the past, he had always thought that the rumors on the internet were lies. After all, he knew that when people interacted with their brothers, they would naturally put their arms around each other's shoulders. He didn't understand what the girls were screaming about. Weren't Almighty Yun and Almighty Lin normal? Why did they suddenly become abnormal? No, that wasn't right. Why were there suddenly gay men around him? Young master was gay, Almighty Qin had been turned gay by his young master and now, Almighty Lin and Almighty Yun were at such a stage, it could be said that as a straight man, he was under a lot of pressure when there were gays around him. It was better to call Madam and ask her to continue shopping with movie queenin. It was too dangerous at home. Chen Xiaodong was afraid that He Honghua wouldn't be able to take it. It was fine that young master was gay, but there were so many of his kind around him. After placing the dishes on the table, Chen Xiaodong went to do his own things. Before he left, he glanced at the empty beer cans at the side. There were quite a lot of them. Bo Jiu was looking at the food as well. As she ate, she arched a brow. As expected, someone was going to be in trouble. Lin Feng was a naive boy. He didn't even realize that the Almighty was trying to force him to drink. This person. Bo Jiu didn't know what to say. At this moment, Lin Feng bolted upright. His body was shaking and his words weren't clear. No, I have to make a phone call and show off to that guy. Bo Jiu shook his glass. It was empty. She glanced at the bottle of Maotai the Almighty had pushed over. Needless to say, Lin Feng definitely drank too much. What are you showing off for? Bo Jiu thought to herself. Lin Feng tossed his phone onto the table before picking it up. He dialed a string of numbers. Showing off that I successfully ran away from home. Bo Jiu. What's there to show off? At this moment, Lin Feng's phone was connected. It was on speaker mode. The voice on the other end was familiar and steady, but there was a tinge of anxiousness. Where are you? Burp, why should I tell you? Lin Feng burped, looking rather arrogant. To Bo Jiu, he was asking for trouble. Yunhu's fingers stilled. You drank? I didn't just drink, I ate meat too. That's right. I even saw. Lin Feng wanted to say that he saw a girl, but after scanning the surroundings, there wasn't a single girl. He changed his words. I even saw a hunk. Yunhu narrowed his eyes, his tone turning cold. Which hunk? A hunk with silver hair. Lin Feng was drunk, acting rather stupid. Don't bother about that. I'm just telling you, I won't be going back today. You can play with yourself. Yunhu arched a brow. A hunk with silver hair? Why? Lin Feng lifted his chin proudly. Can't I have silver hair? I'm more handsome than you anyway. Yunhu's voice was unhurried, as though he had changed into another person. There was even a hint of a smile in his voice. Why not? Have fun. Then, Yunhu ended the call. Lin Feng, who was hung up on, was a little confused. She turned towards Bo Jiu. What does he mean by that? Does he not believe that I'm with a hunk? Bo Jiu held her forehead. He didn't want to talk nonsense with you anymore and was coming to fetch you. Who else do you know besides me, the silver-haired hunk? Bo Jiu wouldn't say that out loud. Lin Feng, the naive fool, had no chance of being saved. At this stage, Qin Mo shook the wine glass in his hand. Even Qin Mo shook the wine glass in his hand, his voice indifferent. It seems like I saved a phone call. That was right. The Almighty had wanted to get Lin Feng drunk because he had a plan. But who would have expected Lin Feng to be so careless? What was this? Did he pack himself up and send it to someone else's mouth to eat? Student Lin Feng, who was drunk, didn't realize this problem and insisted on having a heart-to-heart talk with Bo Jiu. Tell me, isn't he too much? I still don't have a proper girlfriend and every girl that tries to get close to me is because of him. I don't trust women anymore, F***ck. You want a girlfriend? Bo Jiu had always believed that relationships shouldn't be forced. If Lin Feng really wanted a girlfriend, she had to make him stay. Lin Feng shook his head. That isn't the main point. If that isn't the main point, then what is? Bo Jiu arched a brow. Lin Feng took another sip of beer, his expression serious. Do I look like a bottom? Aren't those texts supposed to put me on the top? So you're conflicted about the top? Bo Jiu's lips twitched. Lin Feng waved his hands. That's not it, I can't explain it clearly. I just don't like being controlled, I don't care when he goes out to eat with other girls. Bo Jiu. Was this the time to complain? Senior Lin, you're getting more and more gay. Where's the beer? Lin Feng's beautiful eyes narrowed. Give me another bottle, I have to get drunk with Little Spade today. Little Spade, you can tell me what you are unhappy with, Captain. Don't worry, I will never tell Captain, it will be a secret between us forever. Lin Feng's beautiful eyes narrowed. Fine. He was so drunk that he didn't even know the Almighty was there. Bojo was really worried about a certain someone tonight. To be honest, I really didn't think that Captain would actually be pursued by you. I always thought that the girl he kissed at the ball was his true love. Lin Feng shook his head. Captain is too fickle. When Qin Mo heard this, he raised his eyebrows slowly and smiled. There was an obvious coldness at the corners of his lips. If you get caught by Yunhu tonight, will you die a horrible death? How is that possible? Lin Feng stuttered. That guy must have never expected me to be here. He must be thinking I'm having a date at some hotel. Is that so? Qin Mo lifted the corners of his lips. Bojo watched as the Almighty sent a message to Almighty Yun. Bring him back. The reply came swiftly. I'm on my way, I'll be there soon. Indeed, from Lin Feng's words, Almighty Yun already knew where he was. But Lin Feng didn't feel any sense of danger, he continued to burp. Little Spade, who do you think that girl is? Oh right. Tell me honestly, what kind of clothes were you wearing that day? Why didn't we find you? Guess. Bojo leaned back lazily. Lin Feng shook his head. It must have been ugly, I know how it feels. Dressing up as a girl is going to kill straight guys like us. Burp, that's not right, you aren't straight, you are gay. Wait a minute, stop swaying, let me see for myself. Why does it look so familiar? I remember now, that girl had the same eyes that day. Bojo frowned, wondering if she had been recognized. She didn't want to be recognized. Her head hurt. Even Qin Mo turned to look at Lin Feng when he heard this. It was obvious that Lin Feng was still deep in thought, but only he knew what he was thinking. Bojo was about to speak. Lin Feng slapped his forehead. Little Spade, don't tell me you have a younger sister that you haven't introduced to us. Bojo. What a naive mind, always so curious. Your younger sister is really pretty. Lin Feng was lost in his own imagination. Did Captain agree because you look similar to your younger sister? Sigh. It's another story about a substitute. Little Spade, you're really pitiful. Bojo was speechless. Why would a straight guy like you want to read a substitute story? Who said a straight guy can't read a substitute story? Lin Feng shouted again. I like it. When Qin Mo heard this, he lost his patience. He sent a few more words. Where are you? Very quickly, 2 words appeared on the screen. Entrance. After Qin Mo finished reading, he stood up without a change in expression. Lin Feng hooked his arm around Bojo's shoulders, speaking the truth between brothers. Brother, let me tell you, there aren't any good men. If Captain treats you as a substitute, you have to kick him out. I will fight with you and kick Huzi out. I think you should turn to take a look before you say that. Bojo held her chin, reminding him calmly, you're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.